Gerard is stealing your money?
What the fuck is he talking about? Gerard is obviously not malicious. This is just a multifaceted issue.
Indieland is committing charity fraud?
Bro, I think charity fraud is a little more complicated than what you're talking about.
Hello? Yeah, it's the IRS. What's that? The hero of journalism some ordinary gamers called? He said something about red flags?
Yo, neither of us have enough information to make any assertions about the legality of any of this.
Scott the Woz is racist?
Hi, I'm Maya. I am pretty passionate about this topic, but I'm not a journalist, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not someone who has ever worked at a typical 501c3. I do, however, have the exact same qualifications as some ordinary gamers to make this video. I'm not here for a character assassination of Mutahar. I also don't claim to give you the objective truth because at the end of the day, I am a fallible human being who's going to put my own persuasive spin on this topic the exact same way that some ordinary gamers has. As much as both of us want to believe that we're here to educate you, at the end of the day, what we're doing is primarily for entertainment. The reason I'm so passionate about this is because I strongly feel that SOG has presented a bad faith narrative to over 1 million people about Gerard Khalil and his role in the recent open hand controversy. I'm going to primarily be focusing on SOG's first video, though it's important for you to know that his co-researcher Carl Jobst has also released a few of his own videos about this topic as well. Since I've started writing this script, SOG has released 2 more follow-up videos as well.
Okay, we gotta pause real quick. I have been working on this video since I first saw it on November 13th, 2023. Today, as I'm filming this and the 4th section of this video, it is December 9th. A few hours ago, Gerard released his side of the story. If you are going to watch anything that I reference in my video, I strongly recommend you watch his video. Gerard and Open Hand's perspective after SOG's allegations had been put out there to the public was the last thing I was really missing from my video. Unfortunately, I do not have the mental stability to do a complete rehaul of my script because of Gerard's video releasing today. Instead, I'm sharing what was written as of December 1st with a few things added in here and there. Gerard does touch on some of the things I go through in this video and even provides some really helpful information that neither myself nor Mutahar were working with when we made our respective videos. So please keep in mind that not everything I go through is actually going to be accurate to date, and again, if you want to have the full context, watch Gerard's video. Where relevant, I will add in what Gerard has had to say generally about the topic that I'm also discussing.
SOG's video gives a brief about Gerard, Indieland, Open Hand, then explains how he went onto the IRS tax-exempt organization search and looked up Open Hand's EIN to find their tax filing documents. He goes through each of the years from 2014 to 2022 and shows how they had money coming in, they spent money on operating expenses, but no money was ever distributed for charitable purposes. And initially, one would say, oh, wow, that's kind of weird. What's the deal with that? And after taking his video beat by tedious beat, it turns out that he really only brings up one solid truth that's worthy of discussion, which is the fact that the money at the Open Hand Foundation has not moved in 9 years. However, instead of his video being a thoroughly researched, well thought out discussion about why it's so hard for Open Hand to find a benefactor, the difficulty a family may have in making large dollar amount decisions about a very emotional cause, or, you know, really any elements of a good faith argument, his video quickly becomes a character hit piece against Gerard and a very sincere attempt to have Open Hand investigated by the IRS. So right off the bat, unlike SOG, I'm going to clarify I have biases, and if you care about them, you can read them in the description. We're primarily here to talk about the bait and switch that this video does. You start with one very solid, very strong, indisputable truth that the money hasn't moved. And then everything else in the video is built up and supported by illogical fallacies, half-truths, bad faith arguments, and at times just completely, very easily provable factual inaccuracies. But like any debunking video or look how bad this bad guy is video goes, I don't really know if anything I say today is going to fundamentally change or influence the way that Mutahar chooses to make content. It would be sick as fuck if it did. but it's probably not. My hope is that you as the viewer start to learn about just how easy it is to take someone completely at their word while blatantly ignoring the word of someone else, to not notice the subtleties of bias in someone's content, and particularly to not notice the types of illogical fallacies that's often used in videos like these. I just need to say how scary the timing was of H-Bomber Guy's video, because he did a video about plagiarism and about a lot of bad faith content creators, and he very closely aligned with some of the points I was going to make, but we kind of overlap just ever so slightly, and it's very interesting. It scared the shit out of me because I thought this video was going to become pointless after I'd spent a fucking month working on it. So luckily this is still its own thing. But he had so many good quotes that I can't stop thinking about.
YouTubers who act like serious documentarians gain a shroud of professionalism which then masks the deeply unprofessional things they do. We just saw that with James. I think he's partially got away with what he's doing for so long because he acts so professional about it, so people assume there's no way he could just be stealing shit, so they don't check.
Anyway, first we need to start with the basic context to be sure that whether you're one of those motherfuckers on the Reddit threads just constantly scrolling and typing and theorizing about what this really means, or if you're someone who was casually scrolling on Twitter and saw Gerard was trending, or was on YouTube and saw the thumbnail roll by and wondered what was up with that. Gerard Khalil is an entrepreneur and YouTuber who has been on the platform for over a decade. He's the CEO of That One Video Gamer, his company that runs The Completionist, Super Beer Bros, and many other projects. At age 10, Gerard's mother, Karine Khalil, developed frontotemporal dementia, or FTD. A few years later in 2003, Gerard and his dad, who is the current president, founded the Open Hand Foundation, a private charity intended to fund efforts to find a cure for FTD. Gerard's brother Jacques is the vice president, Gerard is a director, and 2 other family members are also key decision makers. Open Hand has an annual golf tournament fundraiser, and since 2018, Open Hand has been the direct beneficiary of Indieland. Indieland was started as a partnership between Gerard and Open Hand. The event showcases a variety of indie games being live-streamed with Gerard and friends. Proceeds from the sales of games and Indieland merchandise items during that period go to the Open Hand Foundation. They also accept general public donations, all of which they say goes towards dementia research. Or so they say. We're gonna run through the notable specifics and also just my petty little points that I can't let go of, but keep in mind that it's not going to be in the exact same order that SOG presents in his video. Another key thing to know is that throughout his video, SOG sprinkles in these little snippets of the interview that him and Carl did with Gerard, although the full interview is not available online as far as I can find. The fact that we as the audience cannot listen to the interview tells me that we might be missing some key context, particularly about the framing of the conversation that Gerard was working under that we don't hear. Especially considering that prior to this story breaking, Gerard had talked about how he knew about Carl Jobst as a creator, that he liked one of his videos, and he even recommended the host of the podcast he was on to watch his video.
Carl Jobst made a great video that all of you guys should go see, and that this video is just blatantly copying in comparison from the work that he's done.
I found this really interesting to learn because anecdotally, from what I've read on the internet, Gerard tends to reach out to other creators and do kind of a, hey, love what you're doing type of thing. This is all complete speculation. Take this as you will. I have no evidence for this, but there is a piece of me that wonders if he might have messaged Carl before and they had a friendly dialogue. I'm not saying they were BFFs or anything. I'm just saying maybe they were at least creators that had a general mutual respect for one another. Granted, it does seem like the interview was done after Carl and Open Hand had a few correspondences between each other, so I'm not trying to say that Gerard was completely unaware about what they might be talking about in their conversation. All of my pontificating aside, them including Gerard's interview snippets is helpful because we're able to understand a little bit more of his side of the story. But SOG tends to cite every snippet he provides of Gerard as evidence of his malfeasance. Or at the very least, that he's just, selfishly covering his own ass. It doesn't ever seem to me like they really hear what Gerard is trying to say, nor do they really accept what he's saying as any kind of an acceptable answer. My overall impression after watching this video for the first time, getting this interview was their way to say, hey, see, look, we got the guy, we talked to the guy, we got the facts, we did our due diligence, okay? We're journalists. Forgetting that another part of due diligence is being sure to clearly distinguish between what's news and what's commentary. We don't really hear what SOG has to say during the interview, only his commentary after the fact. And again, we do not know the framing of the conversation that Gerard was working under. Throughout the video, most of what we get are SOG's opinions on the facts. And he often switches between the two, which makes it a really muddy kind of viewing experience for people who are just looking for a generally unbiased op-ed about some kind of charity scandal. In the interview, Gerard clarifies that he started talking with potential partners in 2020, which was 2 years after Indieland started. He also owns up to the fact that in 2022, he found out that no money had been moving, and he had simply assumed that the money was being donated to one of the partners they had talked to. Based on everything I know now, I think it may be fair to assume that he probably thought it was going to UCSF, which was a historical benefactor, which we'll talk about that later. He also has this spicy comment.
To answer your question, Carl, I don't have an answer. I think that's my fuck up. I have personally donated to AFTD and Alzheimer's Association over the years. Again, I assumed the money was going there to support them as we were talking negotiations about working with them. I don't really have a true answer for that. And that's on me completely, and I will own up to that. But, you know, again, it doesn't fucking matter. You guys are going to say what you're going to say, and I can't stop it. But the important thing is that all the money is still in the account. None of it's spent erroneously. It's all above board.
And I very sincerely appreciate SOG leaving that in there. I'm not foreshadowing. I just really love how he just tells him what the fuck he thinks. Gerard then says that the money's still in the account, nothing has been hidden, and if he had committed fraud, the government would have gotten his ass by now.
At least legally speaking, everything's above board, and I understand that the question isn't so much legality and so much more about morality.
Of course, SOG tends to primarily focus on the potential legal wrongdoings. SOG repeatedly implies and sometimes even asserts that Open Hand has broken some kind of law, but the relevant professionals should look into the issue more closely. He also cites that he spoke with a few accountants, all of which raised red flag after red flag, but never cites any direct written, audio, or video testimonial. We don't know what specific red flags they had in their own words. While he does show some of his sources on screen, at the time of writing the script for this video, there are 0 sources cited in SOG's description or pinned comment. So let's talk about what SOG got wrong. Again, I don't claim to have any more expertise on talking about this than SOG has, okay? Not a lawyer, not a journalist, not someone with charity experience. But I can utilize the same skill set SOG has of the magic of Googling.
You can see that when they check their organizations, they call themselves a Section 501c3 exempt private foundation. The problem with this is, according to the IRS, they actually have 2 designations, private foundations and public charities. Generally, organizations that are classified as public charities have an active program of fundraising and receive contributions from many sources, including the general public. Again, that would be getting donations through Indieland with like publicly viewed live streams from the general public. Again, that is one issue right there.
He talks briefly about public charities and then insinuates that Open Hand should just be a public organization. He never follows up to discuss what a private foundation is, what the difference between a private and public foundation are, and why it may be that Open Hand decided to be a private foundation. If he did that, it would be a show of good faith. But he didn't. Instead, he implies that he thinks it's bad they're not a public charity because he says so. When I asked about this, his response in part was, Maya, in response to your inquiry, I made the insinuation around the public/private foundation because of the fact that they were raising money through public donations as is criteria by the IRS. So his response tells me that he's made some hasty generalizations. He talked very briefly about this bullet point on this IRS page, but stopped after reading, quote, the general public, end quote, and carried on. By doing this, he makes the false equivalency that because public charities receive the majority of their donations from the general public, that means that all charities who receive majority of their funding from the general public must be public charities. This is simply not true. In fact, the IRS also has this helpful page that notes some key differences between public and private charities. I encourage you to pause and read it in full, but for the sake of time, some key points are And I'm paraphrasing here. Private foundations are typically controlled by family members or a small group of people. Private foundations, because there's less public scrutiny, have more operating restrictions and have to cough up some cash when they break those restrictions. 501c3s are presumed private organizations unless they want to try to get a ruling or determination that allows them to be public instead. I also found this article by 501c3.org that had SOG taken just a few more minutes to Google, the first goddamn paragraph would have cleared things up a lot. Public charities are understood to perform charitable work, while private foundations support the work of public charities. In regards to public charities, at least 50% of the board must be unrelated by blood, marriage, or outside business co-ownership. This is a foundation made in honor of Gerard's mom. I can tell you from my own organizing experience that finding the right people who care about the cause and also have the time and also have the energy, it's tough. It's highly likely that this was the key sticking point in making the foundation private. They probably preferred the board to be family because not only is it hard to find the right people willing to do this, but who's going to care about this more than the family of whom the foundation is made in honor of? Hoopst! Because of that choice, all of them are going to be more than willing to not accept any money for their role, and that would help further operating costs. Now, talking about private charities, and again, feel free to pause and read, but to summarize for time, private charities have more control in their operations. Control comes at the cost of certain limitations and requirements, including a minimum annual asset distribution of 5% each year. And if the organization's primary purpose is financial support of public charities instead of directly operating a program, then a private foundation is likely more appropriate. If Open Hand plans to donate to a charity that then performs the research, I think it's pretty clear that them being a private foundation is nothing of concern. In fact, it's a very appropriate choice. SOG's insinuation to the contrary to me is just evidence that he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, but he's more than willing to cite the first Google source that comes up as damning evidence against Gerard. And throughout this video, I might use Gerard and Open Hand interchangeably because unfortunately that's what he has infected my brain to do. But I'll try to keep distinguishing between the two.
In 2014, the Open Hand Foundation was originally registered as a 501c3 private foundation. When the foundation realized the limitations placed on the private foundations themselves, they sought out advice of legal and financial counsel and took action to switch to a public charity. In February of 2016, they filed to terminate the foundation's private status. In March of 2016, the IRS acknowledged the receipt for termination of private status and indicated to the Open Hand Foundation the necessary requirements the foundation must follow in order to comply with the IRS code. Based on the acknowledgement of the private status termination, the foundation was now required to operate like a public charity as described in the IRS code for a period of 60 months. However, the foundation was also instructed to continue to file as if it were a private foundation. Any possible issues pertaining to such filings can only be considered clerical errors and are in no way intended to be misleading, fraudulent, or criminal in any nature. Since that time, the Open Hand Foundation has been compliant in operating as a public charity, and as such, the status is directly reflected on the IRS's own website.
If SOG had genuine concerns, he could have asked Gerard, why private instead of public?
You know, we'll get back, and if we need any other comment or something, then yeah, we'll talk to you.
Yeah,
about
I mean,
it.
I think, yeah,
Again,
if you do want to...
Instead, he makes an insinuation based on his opinion that he formed after viewing one article without discussing more information or the nuances of the differences. And if you'll allow me to make some unfounded insinuations, I really view this as a creative process of get the facts, get the interview, get all of the supporting evidence, ignore anything that is not supporting evidence, and get the video out. That is not what journalism is, but we'll get to that. And don't you ever dare say that I clickbaited you for nothing. SOG then essentially says that he really urges anyone with relevant accounting experience or experience in the IRS to look into this issue further, conveniently relieving himself of the burden of proof. Next, he discusses that 5% rule that was discussed as a requirement for private charities. I really, truly love this because this man highlights his screen with so much authority. For some reason, though, he doesn't talk about the second half of that highlighted sentence, which states 5% of the fair market value of their endowment each year to be used for charitable purposes. So that's a whole lot of words that I want to be sure that I'm understanding correctly and not making assumptions about, unlike some people. But thankfully for all of us, I have 5% more Googling skills than SOG does, and it turns out that this is pretty quickly resolved as not a red flag. According to this accounting website, the 5% rule requires distribution of at least 5% of the total fair market value of its non-charitable use assets from the preceding year. Non-charitable use assets are not the same thing as revenue and contributions. In fact, we can look at every single year of OpenHand's tax returns and see that under non-charitable use assets, they never listed a single fucking dollar. So the 5% rule simply does not apply to them. But the 5% rule is one of SOG's key points he talks about that brings up red flags from these accountants, and it should be cause for great concern from the public. My bare bones ass Google searching seems to pretty easily point to the fact that the 5% rule is not something we even need to be concerned about in this situation. And that really makes me question the legitimacy of these accountants and their expert opinions. SOG quoted the 5% rule out of context without fully understanding it, while using it as damning definitive evidence against Gerard. Later in the video, he does technically read out the full sentence, but I want you to listen to how he presents this.
This is a very complicated rule, but the idea is so again, I want to see how this rule is done, because according to the filings we've seen, they haven't actually given any money.
To me, from the perspective of a lay person, when I hear someone say that, this is a complicated thing, but the general idea is, your assumption is probably going to be that that person knows what the fuck they're talking about. SOG does not know what the fuck he is talking about. I asked SOG about why he got the 5% rule wrong, and he basically gave me a non-answer. His response was, following this into the 5% rule, I still feel their org should be making charitable donations each year. I read this as, so about the thing I was wrong about. I really feel that it's wrong of OpenHand to do what they're doing right now. This is a great example of a tu quoque, which is similar to an ad hominem, but instead of him giving back criticism to me, he takes the criticism I give him and passes it on to OpenHand. It's a fantastic way to deflect a question. And while to some people this may sound as simple as, people make mistakes, he can't get everything right, I'm left thinking about debunking, and how debunking is not an effective way to change a person's mind. Because when you debunk someone, they simply point to the next place that you need to go to keep you distracted from their bullshit. And debunking doesn't even really change minds, but some experts argue that empathy can. That's why I've taken a lot of care in the way I try to present this to you, though I'm sure my editing will be more cruel than what my on-paper script is. But I'm really not trying to villainize SOG in this video. But I'm also not going to stick around for a back and forth game of new evidence he brings up and playing some kind of cat and mouse game of debunking. I'm here to point out his methodology and why I think it is the perfect way to make bad faith content. He adds in his message, I also did make a point that I'm not a tax expert in that field, so I would like an expert to explain this. I take huge issue with this whole, I'm no expert. I'm just bringing up the facts, but at the end of the day, it's down to the professionals what the truth is. He does this when it's convenient to avoid getting called out for being wrong, or maybe getting sued. But the rest of the time, when it's extremely fucking convenient for him to be the expert, he's more than happy to become any expert he needs to in order to be correct. On this note, I also want to mention something else he does throughout this video that I really take issue with. Saying something along the lines of, I want every professional to look into this, because if I could find this, imagine what the experts could find. Because he's doing two things at once. One, He's doing a CYA to make sure that if he does get anything wrong, because he makes content on a nearly daily basis, and that's inevitable, he can say he deferred to experts for the final say. But 2, he's still very firmly grasping on to the narrative that it's just a matter of time before the experts get a hold of this and they prove that I'm completely right about everything. And he's basically guilty already, ladies and gentlemen. Just a very simple trick to get the viewer to think that you're just a good guy whistleblower, while also silently nudging your viewer base so they can hear the quiet part. It's very subtle, but that's how I perceive it. Why is it okay to firmly assert you are telling the truth, especially about something as complex as American tax law? Based on Googling, only to raise your hands up when you're caught and say, well, gee, did I ever say I was an expert? No, that's not what accountability looks like. And it's not just that I think this is a really cowardly way to respond. I also take issue with this because Mudahar continues to push for OpenHand to be investigated by the IRS. And after watching too much of this guy and talking to him in a few messages, I really think he believes his own bullshit. I think he believes he's on a crusade to right the great wrongs that OpenHand has committed against the donors who trusted them. And if you'll allow me to be shitty for a second, I think that this is a pathetic way to try and give yourself legitimacy. He obviously has no qualms with how this will affect OpenHand, the people who run it, or other small organizations out there who may start to be perceived in this light now that this story has broken. OpenHand probably should have been more upfront with their struggles and talked about the challenges they were facing instead of sitting on the money for 9 years. But does that mean it should all just be burnt to the fucking ground? Mudahar thinks he's the good guy here. And I am not trying to say that I'm the real good guy. I'm saying that this is a very lazy way to try and give yourself credibility and prove you know what you're talking about when you really fucking don't. And I know he's probably gonna watch this and say, hey, I'm just turning over information to the authorities. I'm handing it over now. I just want them to do an investigation and determine the truth. Look, buddy, truth is, you did your own half-assed investigation that reveals so much more about you as a content creator than it does Gerard or OpenHand. Why do you think this video is so fucking long? I'm dressed as a giant red flag for everybody today. You're welcome. Next up, he states that
any accountant that I've shown this to has brought up red flags after red flags.
Note that there's no description on the screen, right? He just chatted up some accountants, as one does. So I decided to ask him about this and see why he chose not to include any direct testimonial from any of these professionals. He told me that he showed the details to a personal acquaintance and a business acquaintance that have relevant experience. Mind you, these are people that he thinks have the relevant experience. He provided me with more details that I'm not discussing out of respect for privacy, but personally, the details he told to me don't really scream that he talked to two people who were up-to-date charity tax accountants. Honestly, my first thought when he told me more details was, oh shit, my husband worked at H&R Block for 4 months. I mean, he's got professional accounting experience. I should reference him in my video. He also stated that he, quote, didn't include it since that's the general sentiment I got from 2 accountants. But I'll concede, I should have introduced a prepared statement from one of them. It's not that I don't believe he was told by counterparts he asked that this situation brought up red flags. It's that I wonder, what were the specific red flags? After points, he will often say that this is another one of the things that the accountants brought up as a red flag, but if I'm correct about the 5% thing, for example, what knowledgeable charity accountant would have said that that was a red flag? And also, what are these shadow accountants' on-paper qualifications to weigh in on this? I'm trying my best to take him at his word and be a little good faith about it, but I'm of the opinion that the more context provided, the better when making sweeping generalizations like red flags. Also, a cynical part of me really wonders if this was a, hey, so would you be willing to go through some of these facts that I found out about? It seems like there's something kind of sus going on, but I would really love to know your perspective as someone who has the relevant experience to talk about this. Or if it was more of a, damn bro, check this out, isn't this crazy? Damn bro, that's crazy! At any rate, as it stands in the video, this is a very weak appeal to authority. It's really important to be wary when you hear someone say something along the lines of, I spoke to a professional and they said this, if they don't have a citation or a direct quote. Whenever possible, it is always better to have more context about who the person is, what their credentials are, and why they have the authority to weigh in on what we're discussing. Now, unlike Gamer Boy, I don't have accountant buddies. I actually don't really have many friends at all. But I am one semester shy of an associate's in accounting. That's right, I'm a college dropout. And with my beta brain experience, I can weigh in and say that this doesn't really feel like an accounting question to me. The accounting is actually pretty clear and cut and dry. I mean, there's your accounts receivable, there's your accounts payable, and there's the sum at the bottom. That accounting, to me, if I could be a little anecdotal, I think only a charity accountant could even begin to weigh in on something like this because they have more knowledge about the specifics. But even then, they might not have enough information to make a clear assertion. Thankfully, we can take a look at this tweet from the Lil Wooly, who claims to have 7.5 years of experience specifically in 501c3 accounting. The most critical point they bring up about OpenHand's accounting is the fact that, yes, the tax filings probably could have been more specific and detailed, though it's not really legally necessary and may not have even been worth the time since OpenHand, in relation to other NPOs, is pretty small. SOG brought up the point that their expenses not being broken down was an audit waiting to happen, but Lil Wooly mentions that there's likely no regulation requiring them to detail the expenses. Also, if they were to be audited, it's extremely likely that OpenHand will have the paper trail to back up how those expenses were totaled. They also mentioned Carl's video, which I presume based on this tweet made an assertion that signatures missing on the page was cause for concern, but they said it's more likely it's an online upload quirk than it is anything to really be worried about.
The foundation files all their taxes electronically, which does not require a physical signature on the actual forms, only e-file authorization forms that are sent from a certified public accountant for electronic signature. Not only is this legal, but it is the industry standard for filing taxes here in the United States.
Because I don't hate myself and I refuse to use Reddit as a source to discuss this topic, I haven't read any opinions from someone who has NPO experience. You know, someone who can maybe explain why it's so hard to just donate the money and feel like a good chunk of it is going to go towards the research you want it to go towards. I think that perspective is sorely missed here, so again, take my perspective as you wish. I also want to talk briefly about SOG's third video, and yes, he has made 3 videos in the time that I am on filming for this one. Fuck my life. In it, he says multiple times that this is not just speculation, ladies and gentlemen. Then he goes on to speculate. So he talks about the potential revenues that the golf tournament could have earned after looking at photos of the banners that listed the sponsors for that year and comparing it to a price list of which he uses 2023 to price out 2021 and 2022. I really did not want to dignify this with any kind of response in this video, but I knew if I did not, there would be Gamergeddon in my comments about what about the golf tournament money. So unlike SOG, who tabulated on a Word document like an absolute fucking madman, I had the decency to open up a Google Doc and take a look at this. You can also view it in the description. After a couple hours of looking over the things that he discussed, I came to a really simple conclusion. I am not qualified to decide what this information means, and neither is Mudahar. Because in the same way that he can run off with the narrative that this is definitive evidence that someone must be stealing from this charity, and yes, by video 3, he has escalated up to just straight up saying what he wanted us all to think, which is that someone is stealing. He makes claims such as maybe the checks got cashed, but not to OpenHand. I can also easily argue that maybe the golf tournament didn't make shit, and worst case scenario, they underreported by about $4,000. Because I can pick and choose whatever multitude of possibilities I want to have in order to fit my narrative. But my narrative is not to fervently defend OpenHand, it's to point out the issues I take with his framing of his narrative. There's also a lot of other shit in that video I take issue with, but again, I cannot get derailed, okay? This video has to come out by the end of the year. I'm so fucking sick of thinking about this. I also want to mention the timeline in which I messaged Mutahar. Mutahar responded to my questions about why his video contains factual inaccuracies on November 19th. In the third video released on December 2nd, he says,
So yesterday, or maybe the day before, depending on how quick I can get this out and how vetted I can get all this information, my co-investigator, Carl Jobst, had released an update video where he dove...
And that to me indicates he probably filmed the video on November 30th or December 1st. He responded to my questions about factual inaccuracies on November 19th. That means he probably had about 10 days to think about what I brought to his attention, and based on the way he responded, I think he knows that he made some major errors. So I'm either 100% talking out of my ass, as someone who has spent more time working on this one video than I think he has in all 3 of his videos, or Mutahar knew or realized that he made multiple mistakes that would fundamentally alter the opinion of his audience about this topic, and chose not to bring it to their attention. SOG discusses what qualifies as charity fraud versus fraudulent activity, and the first part he reads relates to how fraud is when someone takes advantage of a charity for personal gain. He doesn't expand on this further, and while some could dismiss this as him just reading off the page, I think it's lazy, and I think it's a little dangerous. Because he chooses here not to add his commentary about what he thinks on whether or not this was a situation for personal gain, because I wonder if he could get sued for that. Audience members are left to consider the situation in whatever framing has been nicely prepared for them. And I don't think it's unfair to say that lots of audience members were left thinking Gerard stole money. But who needs clarity when you're making a variety of character attacks and accusations? Instead, he moves on to highlighting, quote, fraudulent activity can also occur when people make dishonest or inflated claims, end quote. He also mentions that
even with the legal match definition, one of the most common ways to commit charity fraud include pretending to be a charity or falsely claiming to be affiliated with a legitimate charity in order to solicit donation.
Is one bullet point on the common ways that charity fraud is committed. Then he says that this is what inspired him and Carl to dig deeper into what exact claims Gerard made about charity associations during Indieland. In our DMs, SOG added, quote, also, through their events, they claim to be working with general charities such as the Alzheimer's Association. He also mentioned in his video that anyone watching this stream would believe that the money is going directly to charity. Anyone. You do, right? You do now, right? So let's talk about exactly what Gerard said. I do not have the time to vet every single second of every single Indieland, but for Indielands 2020 through 2023, I did a Control F on each transcript for dementia, and every instance of it simply discussed dementia research or finding a cure. I checked for Alzheimer's and UCSF, and I didn't get any results. And I'm completely aware that the transcription easily could have missed any of those Control Fs. Transcription's not amazing on YouTube right now, but I highly doubt after being made aware of the money situation in 2022 that Gerard would have specifically named a charity. In 2020, during the Sea of Stars stream, Gerard says that they will soon be partnering with the Alzheimer's Association, not we are partnering. This is a clip that SOG directly cites as a way to discredit Gerard and prove that he is lying. Despite the fact that Gerard made it clear in their interview that it wasn't until 2022 that he was aware that the money wasn't moving. While doing this Control F search, I really couldn't help but feel some eerie similarities between myself and SOG, especially seeing his third video and knowing I guess he's as skilled as me, and he gamered up, and he knows how to hit Control F like me too. Parallels are not beyond me, but the reasons I bring this up is because that to me indicates 2020 was the most recent example he had of Gerard talking about partners directly. In fact, he probably turned up the same results that I did. I think he hoped that him putting that description down there would make it look like he was citing something, and also simultaneously hoped that no one would stop to really consider the timeline of that. Because this being a quote from 2020 to me indicates that Gerard was telling the truth when he said he was talking to partners as early as 2020. He says they're soon to be partnered with the Alzheimer's Association. He wasn't aware there were issues with the money until about 2 years later. When you listen to streams from the past few years, he is very concise in saying that they are raising money for dementia research. Take a listen.
Just as a quick reminder, Indieland 2021, we're raising money for dementia research prevention. And as a reminder, we're raising money for dementia research. We're raising money for dementia. Yeah, give a clap for our special guests. Of course. We're raising money for dementia research, and we are raising money for dementia research. Really glad that you're all joining us here. For those of you just joining us, we're raising money for dementia research. Welcome back to Indieland. We are raising money for dementia research. Hey, welcome back to Indieland. We're raising money for dementia research. Thank you all for being here. If you're just tuning in, we are raising money for dementia research. Hey everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Indieland 2022. This is the 5th year that we've been spotlighting indie games and raising money for dementia research in honor of my mother's passing with her over decade-long battle with frontotemporal dementia. And honestly, I am just so humbled that all of you showed up this year, let alone year after year, to watch some killer indie games for a fantastic cause. For those of you guys who don't know, we're raising money for dementia research. All the money goes to the Open Hand Foundation, an organization that we started in honor of my mom, and all that money goes to dementia research. We don't touch any of it. We just work with the people who do need the money, and we help them do their thing. All the money raised this weekend does not come to us. It goes straight to dementia research.
So he never once, at least during 2023, says that the money is going to go directly to any particular charity other than Open Hand, who helps charities do their thing. And okay, I get it. I do that technically, maybe legally, that is a statement that could be considered misleading. But I also think a key part, based on my legal eagle classes, is that intent is a huge component of fraud. So let's run through some of the most common ways to commit charity fraud. Quote, pretending to be a charity or falsely claiming to be affiliated with a legitimate charity in order to solicit donations, end quote. Open Hand is not pretending to be a charity, nor do I think they're falsely claiming affiliation. We've already run through why I don't think what Gerard says qualifies as false affiliation, but his brother Jacques did mention UCSF as part of their historical contributions. And at first, it got me curious, because how can they have a historical contributor if they haven't donated anywhere in 9 years? Their website says they, quote, support the following organizations in their research and support for frontotemporal dementia and other benevolent causes, end quote. And UCSF is listed. I mean, at first, I got a little excited. I mean, the prospect of SOG having 2 things he got right. Now, that's something to talk about. That's some more nuance in the other direction, so I don't feel like I'm just tearing this dude down for hours. After all, the tax documents since 2014 showed no contributions anywhere. But you know, then I did this wild thing. And I'm not saying I'm a scholar or anything, but I did read their website. And I learned that Open Hand has been around since 2003. Now, you smarty pantses at home already knew that because I gave you that context because, gee, what do you know, kind of helpful to keep those things in mind. Because knowing that, then I think it's pretty fair to assume that from 2003 to 2013, Open Hand probably has made contributions to UCSF, and therefore it's completely factual that they are a historical benefactor.
When my mother passed away in 2013, we donated her brain and spinal cord to the same academics and doctors we worked with to further advance their research. There's a link in the description to her autopsy report that confirms her brain and spinal cord were both donated to science. This was an extremely personal decision for us. Because of my family's history, we had considered all legacy efforts that we had personally made to be a part of the Open Hand Foundation's history, which ultimately led to its creation.
That means there really isn't any kind of false affiliation claim to be made about Open Hand unless my assertions about what Gerard said aren't true. Quote, making false representations about the cause or the amount of money that will be donated to the cause, end quote. Keyword here is that it says the cause, not the charity. From what I have seen of watching Indieland streams, Gerard always says, raising money for dementia research. Open Hand's letters discuss that their cause is dementia research. I don't think in any way that the cause itself has been misrepresented. Quote, diverting funds raised for charitable causes to personal use, end quote. Despite the story that MSN writers have chosen to run with, which severely disappointed and upset me, which is that Gerard is stealing money, and then they changed it to accused of pocketing, which is basically saying stealing, and recently, in the past few days at least, they changed it back to say stealing again. Gerard did not steal any money, or at least nobody has any fucking evidence of that being the case. His family members didn't steal any money. The money's accounted for. The money simply has yet to be donated.
I can confirm that as of Wednesday, November 29th, 2023, the Open Hand Foundation has donated $600,000 to the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration. However, it did take too long to get to this moment, and for that, I am sorry.
There's a few more bullet points, but I don't think they're quite as relevant. And again, like Gerard said himself, probably more a question of morality than legality. But at the end of the day, I don't think he really said anything that is definitive evidence of him being fraudulent. Something else I want to mention, and again, not a lawyer, but Gerard talking about these things in the middle of a live stream, you know, the times when our favorite content creators are at their linguistic best and say everything with such poetry. I would think that might give a little bit of leeway in terms of if Gerard used slightly improper phrasing, especially considering the timeline that I discussed. Any nitpicking that SOG does of Gerard's phrasing completely ignores the context in which Gerard was saying them in the first place. However, I do understand and empathize with the people out there who still would have heard what he said and interpreted it as him saying money is going to go directly to a charity today. The question is about what does the law say about fraudulent statements? And at any rate, I feel neither myself or SOG are qualified to make any assertions about this. So take my perspective as you wish.
Now, I think this is a very, very dumb point.
Prior to their interview with Gerard, SOG and Carl had multiple correspondences with Jacques. He wrote, quote, "Since our official registration as a foundation, we have been evaluating potential beneficiaries who align with our vision, entities that could use our funds efficiently and effectively without a substantial portion being diverted to administrative expenses." End quote. SOG completely ignores the part of the paragraph where they say that they have not only donated money, but body parts to organizations that they later found out were probably not worth donating body parts to. A knock knock, it's an emotional appeal here, but if I found that out, I would be fucking devastated. I just think that is such crucial context to have in order to understand why it is Open Hand is being so cagey about just giving the money away, right? It's not that they are just hyper paranoid, it's that they have had real world experiences that give them reason to worry about a charity not using what they give them effectively. SOG mentions their response as to what they meant about body parts, but he never personally spends much time discussing what they say about it. Are you noticing a theme yet? SOG ignores any opportunity for you to have empathy for the people he talks about, in case you didn't get the theme.
Whether it's UCSF or a partner that's also on our website, because we don't have any other benefactors currently. Like that's why I was like, well, they're taking care of it, but nothing was ever brought to my attention. I just knew that conversations were happening between Alzheimer's Association of America, AFTD Foundation, UCSF started a new organization, I think called like Bluefin or Blue Group, which is like supposed to be their 501c part of their organization. I have a paper trail of us talking to other organizations as early as 2020 and 2021 in an attempt to pay them what they were owed. And most of the conversations we had from some of the bigger orgs like Alzheimer's, they were like, look, if you're not going to pay more than 6 figures or 6+ figures of what they asked for, then you're just going to waste it. So the goal on the back end for my family that I've been told is like, we're just going to raise a bunch of money and then give it to one org and like make a bigger impact rather than just giving smaller donations that don't move the needle.
SOG thinks that this point is dumb. When I first heard him say that, I just had to laugh my ass off because here I am, listening to Gerard and thinking, okay, that kind of makes some sense. I really get that. And you know, what would I do in that situation? I think that would be quite the challenge, especially considering the family dynamics. I mean, none of us have perfect families to get along with. We all have our disagreements, and it's a lot of money too. I mean, jeez. And SOG just says, "You're stinky." Like, what do you mean? His explanation wasn't good enough for you? We'll talk about journalistic integrity later, I promise. Anyway, he says that he thinks Open Hand waiting to reach $1 million to donate is stupid because he can go online right now. And as an individual donating to a charity organization, he can donate $35 right now to the Alzheimer's Association. Not that he ever fucking does. But remember, Gerard never said they can't donate the money. Gerard said it's just not the time to donate it yet, because a lot of the money is going to go towards operating expenses. Because keep in mind, this is a situation of donating from private organization to public organization. SOG tries to make a point about this, but it's so disingenuous. And if I can add, I think his point is a dumb point. SOG basically says that if what Gerard says is true, that a low dollar donation isn't going to be as effective as a higher dollar donation, then why is it when you go to donate $35 online, they don't put a pop-up up that says, if you want your money to do anything, you better donate $35,000. Oh boy. I feel like this is insulting to the audience. But obviously I need to explain that a charity would never do that for multiple reasons, right? First of all, they probably understand that a person making a $35 contribution is not in the same market to make a $35,000 contribution. You know, 1,000 times the original planned amount? As far as I understand, charities don't need to tell you at the time of donation exactly how your donation is going to be distributed. That's why websites like Charity Navigator are really helpful if you're trying to make a determination about what charity you want to donate to. Also, mind you, he's comparing a hypothetical situation of a $35 donation from an individual to a public charity as similar to a situation of a private foundation donating $650,000 to a public charity. That's a total false equivalency. Those are not the same scenarios at all. But you know, him talking about the $35 thing really got me to think about the donations that I make on a regular basis. And if I may, I do want to take a moment to plug donating to a local organization or news outlet or some kind of charity in your area that's doing work you really respect and love. Because donating locally is a great way to ensure that your own community can grow and thrive. Even just $5 a month can make a huge difference. But I mean, enough of me being such a good person. If I wanted to make a contribution online, I can select that I want to designate my gift for a specific cause, but it doesn't break down the costs of what percentage of the money is going where. So I reached out to the org about this, and they let me know in part that, quote, approximately 85 cents of every dollar donated goes directly to support people in need. This includes donations designated to specific programs. The administrative fees ensure the effective funding and execution of that initiative, end quote. They also discussed that the Better Business Bureau has a guideline of a 35% maximum for overhead costs, and that their United Way is above industry average. So based on their per dollar rate, I would assume that puts their overhead at about 15%. With that, it's spreadsheet time, baby. Oh, you stink! No. Okay, I get it. All right, not everyone is like me and my friend who fucking salivate anytime we get the opportunity to .xlsx some shit. But the numbers tell a really interesting story. I decided to see what OpenHand's finances actually look like in terms of percentages, because it's really easy for average people like us to see thousands of dollars on a page and think, oh my god, that's a lot. Like, a life-changing amount of money for some people. Just so you know, Gerard said that they don't touch any of the money, and SOG follows that up by saying that that's false because they have spent money on operating expenses. I think what Gerard meant by not touching the money is that they haven't used any money for any purposes they weren't supposed to use it for. Because again, most people generally understand that operating costs are just kind of part of the deal. Gerard also clarified in the interview that OpenHand did on some years provide funding to Indieland, but no more than roughly $2,000 on those years. And as a reminder, the only tax documents Carl uploaded are from 2014 to 2022, so we're not going all the way fucking back to 2003. Okay, it's not even necessary. I also want to remind you that Indieland started in 2018, so 4 of these years are not relevant to Indieland. SOG never really clearly made that distinction when I think the video would have really benefited from it. I encourage you to pause and take a look at each year if you're interested, but on average from 2014 to 2022, their operating expenses were very close to that presumed 15% gold standard. If we're only looking at the years Indieland ran from 2018 to 2022, operating expenses go even lower to a mere 11.85%. On average for all the Indieland years, about 88 cents of every dollar will go directly to charity. Something else I found really interesting when mapping out the money was that operating expenses actually went down during the years that Indieland was running. I think one of SOG's goals was to make audience members feel that Gerard and or his family members were using Indieland as a way to funnel money off to themselves on the side or do some kind of non-suable accusation that he can insinuate to all of us. But if anything, it seems like Indieland actually has been beneficial to OpenHand in terms of lowering operating costs. Now, to be clear, correlation does not always mean causation, and there could be many reasons as to why operating expenses went down during the same time frame that Indieland started and continued. However, I personally find this to be fairly reassuring in terms of their responsibility with their operating expenses. I encourage anyone who's interested to check out my spreadsheet, my formulas, double check the numbers, and if you want to do that, it's in the description as well. I bring these numbers up because SOG brought them into the conversation. He made the assertion that OpenHand shouldn't have any operating costs whatsoever, and I think it's pretty fair to say that that's just not a reasonable assertion to make.
You should just donate the money. He says, how can you make this right? It's donate the money. Just donate the money. The money is there. All you gotta do is donate it. You should just be writing a check to them. It's never too late to donate. Fucking donate this money.
So one of SOG's most commonly used illogical fallacies throughout this video is argument from repetition. What that means is that instead of providing more information or more evidence, SOG just simply restates the same statement over and over again. Just donate the money. I think it's fair to presume from what Gerard said in the interview that Carl and SOG reaching out is what provoked OpenHand to just try and finally figure this out and get it taken care of. Not that that would make anyone happy when they do. I've yet to receive a response from OpenHand on whether or not they've donated it, but again, keep in mind, they said they do not plan to comment on this further. At least at the time of recording, nothing has changed, but it could change soon. At any rate, I do think that SOG and Carl will be the reason that they do just donate the money, despite them saying it's not going to be as effective. SOG states,
with over $600,000 sitting in an account, that's going to do an actual difference in the world. At least more difference than just sitting in a bank account anyways.
Which on paper is true. But this continues to ignore the fact that Gerard says if they donate it right now at 600K, the money's not going to be as effective, and more of it is going to go towards operating costs, something that SOG obviously takes very great issue with. Gerard also said that the Alzheimer's Association told them that unless they're donating 6+ figures, so to me that means about $1 million, more of that money is going to end up going towards operating expenses. SOG never acknowledges this challenge. SOG never talks about Gerard saying this. SOG, as a reminder, says that this point about the 7 figures is dumb. He follows up Gerard explaining the struggle to find a right organization by saying that all charities have administrative expenses and that plenty of charities make it by on low-dollar donations. Again, I thought he had a problem with operating costs. Repeating just donate the money over and over again is consistently ignoring the context that Gerard tried to provide. SOG is creating a false dilemma of you better donate the money, because if you don't donate the money, that means you're a bad charity. I am so sincerely curious about how Carl and Mudahar responded in that interview, because I highly doubt they think that the logical response in that moment would have been, hey, I know you just explained why there's a lot of complicated factors going on here, and I know you said that the Alzheimer's Association said your money's kind of worthless unless you wait to hit 1 million, but like, just donate the money. Another way SOG colors this interview snippet is by saying,
now again, Gerard will tell us, how do you make this right? And again, instead of worrying about how the internet perceives you after watching this video or this news story, you should just donate the money to the charities that you've said.
If you've been a fan of Gerard, you understand that, as far as we're able to see, he isn't really worried about public perception of him as much as he is as an entrepreneur and someone who makes his livelihood off of the relationship he has with his audience, ensuring that his audience trusts him. To say, wow bro, why are you so worried about your image when you should be worried about charity, like me, is a really shitty way to make sure your audience looks at Gerard as someone who is just purely self-centered and egocentric. If I were to empathize for a moment, for but a moment, if I were Gerard, I think I would be constantly worrying about this. That is a lot of money to find the right home for. All while being money that you raised with your friends, with the help of your audience, with other people's audiences, strangers, celebrities, and all in honor of your deceased mother. That's heavy shit, man. And as someone who worries about a lot of shit, I can also tell you that once you start having all of these different things to worry about and keep track of and to-dos, you're bound to miss something. You're bound to drop the ball somewhere, and it just becomes so overwhelming that you don't even know where to start. It's more than I think one person can really process. I feel like SOG just completely ignores the context that Gerard provides, despite it making things more understandable as to why Open Hand got here in the first place. He wraps up by saying,
Why do you have to run these long-term partnerships? If you're going to donate to the Alzheimer's Association, you should just be writing a check to them.
Then moves on to more from Jacques' first letter. He reads, quote, I would like to address the regulatory framework within which 501c3 organizations like ours operate. We're subject to stringent regulations and are required to maintain compliance with federal laws governing charitable organizations. Our operations and financial activities are transparent to regulatory bodies, including the IRS, and are subject to review to ensure adherence to these laws. Should there be any irregularities or misuse of funds, agencies such as the Department of Justice would intervene. Then he responds by saying,
Dude, the US government is not God.
And that there's probably a lot of bad shit going on, but the IRS doesn't catch it all the time. And it's a fair point, though not really a necessary one. I get he's saying there's a lot of bad people out there who do bad things and never get in trouble for it. But it sure is interesting how he decides to mention this in relation to Open Hand, conveniently inviting people to see Gerard as someone just waiting to get caught. From what I could find, there aren't really a lot of statistics on charity fraud besides small-scale or localized studies, and my presumption is that's because, well, it's not very easy to have data on who's committing fraud if they're not caught. So I can't confidently attest to whether or not charity fraud is or is not a widespread problem, or how often it happens in smaller charities like Open Hand. I also understand that SOG probably interprets this letter as a bunch of PR, notes app, apology bullshit. And there's a right for all of us to have a healthy skepticism when we see an organization say, we follow the law, when you have a suspicion otherwise. It's also important that our healthy skepticism doesn't supersede our ability to trust someone at their word if majority of the evidence is pointing to them telling the truth. He also highlights Open Hand's comment that they believe Carl's inquiries are unwarranted and unfounded, and SOG disagrees, citing his high council of accountants and their never-ending sea of waving red flags. SOG also brings up the point that normally when YouTubers do something for charity, they just put a fundraiser button on one of their videos. But most YouTubers don't host their own annual charity event, and because they don't host their own annual charity event, it's much easier to add a fundraiser button to one of their videos. His statement ignores all the context around how Indieland is set up, and he also ignores Gerard's point where he says that they'll make a bigger difference with one large lump sum of money. Lots of YouTubers slap on the donation button like it's your aunt's birthday and she's raising $20 for the local humane society, okay? There's not always the most due diligence in those situations. There are some people who don't know a lot about the charities that they donate to. They're just making an effort to do something good with their respective platform. I personally think that forming your own private foundation requires a lot of due diligence because it's far more responsibility than just slapping a fundraiser button on one of your videos. It's yearly tax filings. It's, as we're discussing now, deciding what to do with potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's a variety of obligations they had to take on, and I think they chose to take them on because that meant they would be able to decide exactly what to do with every cent. I bring this up because I think it's another occasion where SOG chooses to ignore meaningful context. Time for the little bullshit lightning round, because I'm petty. At the end of the video, SOG does a bunch of repetition, even down to repeating the same main points twice in a row. I'm going to quickly run through the ones he brings up that don't quite fit into other segments of this video.
If you touch any money from charity, even if it's for operating expenses, that's not money that's all going to charity.
Like I talked about a little bit before, I think anyone who donates to a charity nowadays understands that at least some of it is going to go to operating expenses. In fact, there's plenty of articles online about what percentage goes towards operating expenses and how donors are turned off by overhead costs. I think it's pretty fair to say that there's a general awareness that not every penny you donate is going directly to that research or services provided. It's important to remember that operating costs, so long as they're reasonable, are all in service of getting the money to the right place. Giving money requires spending money. And I know that sounds really silly, but it's true. Because giving away money requires people to do the labor to fundraise, to keep the books in check, and to take the time to collaborate with beneficiaries, among other things. A few years ago, I used to be so frustrated with this concept, especially in the world of politics. Why do people spend thousands of dollars to host an event to raise money? I mean, if you have the guest list, just send them a request for a donation and call it a day. But it's really not that simple. Some people need to be wined and dined and feel like they're part of a community to really understand why their donation matters. Some people need the fundraising event going on to even know that fundraising for this cause is happening and matters. SOG lives in a blissful utopia where people will donate without provocation and where NPOs function off of the rest of a capitalist society somehow being willing to volunteer 100% of their labor for the sake of the cause. That kind of situation of decent success for NPOs with minimal operating costs is an outlier.
You have an obligation, a legal obligation, to donate to those exact organizations.
He said supported, worked with, partnered with, but never that this charity is going to be the direct beneficiary. Again, neither of us know for sure if Open Hand has a legal obligation because neither of us have consulted a lawyer.
And again, to also respond to Gerard when we were talking, it's not about writing a check to any organization. It's about writing the amounts for those exact organizations that you've been listing throughout the years.
You know when you're in the shower and you've got such a fucking sick comeback to something someone said earlier that day? I'm getting big that energy. This tells me he's having some icebox moments about the interview that he, in part, conducted. Because to me, if I had the recording of me making those snappy comebacks, you bet your ass I'd put it in my video, because that's some tasty content. Instead, it seems like he was in the middle of filming and said, "Oh yeah, and another thing." I bring this up because I think this is a tell that SOG is not a very good interviewer, nor a very prepared interviewer. It's also evidence to me that he's a chicken shit interviewer. He didn't, as far as I can tell, say any of what he said in his video directly to Gerard to see how he would respond. Again, I love for SOG to release the full interview so we can have the full context. I didn't ask him to when I messaged him because I wanted to keep my questions really succinct, but please, prove me wrong. Release the interview and make me look like a fool.
Again, if you could name these people, why couldn't you write a check to them?
Such a disingenuous question. Like, you know why they haven't donated yet, bro. Come on.
$650,000 is a very, very, very good amount to start actually making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's. When I hear charity money hasn't been appropriated when it should be for stuff like this, it burns me on the inside.
These are some other statements that really deeply get me, because he's doing something subtle here. The way he's saying these things comes off as if SOG cares more about this cause than Gerard. And mind you, that's a subjective thing. None of us can really say for sure who cares more. But if we're talking subjective, I think that the guy who lost his mother to the disease, the guy who as a kid helped co-found a charity in honor of this cause, and as an adult has used his own business assets and staff members to help make a charity drive to support dementia research, he might have just a little bit more skin in the game than a guy who makes drama channel content. I just think it's kind of goofy, and it leaves SOG's audience with the impression that he is on the moral high ground at all times.
Because for anybody watching, for anybody looking at this who's ever donated to Indieland, you want your money to go to the places that you were told.
This is an appeal to emotion and a direct attempt to upset and outrage Indieland donors. It gives me big Fox News energy. We'll talk about that later too. He repeats his point that the IRS are the ones who need to look into this and that the whole situation is really weird. And to his audience, that's gonna make him go, huh, IRS, that's like real shit. Huh, yeah, this is really weird. So he must be guilty. Many people are probably going to do that logical leap, and I don't think it's a stretch for me to say that I think that might have been the intention. This is not an exact quote, but I'm summarizing so it actually makes sense. But he says something along the lines of, the damning part about this is not that this is the completionist. The damning part about this is that it makes me not trust charities anymore. What a convenient thing for someone to say who probably was never going to donate to a charity. This is my problem with people using a stream of consciousness approach on topics that require extreme precision. Because he names off things that give you an emotional response. You know, maybe you trusted Gerard too. And you know, man, who can we trust anymore, right? But his sentence doesn't actually make sense. You not trusting charities anymore isn't damning. That just sucks for you, I guess. It's another instance of him starting a sentence as though he's going to provide some more of that damning evidence of malfeasance and then just states an opinion. But it's a great way to ensure that your audience will think that you had some really compelling evidence despite you never really ever providing much more than one solid truth.
This isn't like childhood tabloid gossip stuff. This is serious situations that need to have federal agencies looking into.
This is like super serious, okay? Again, while there is a legitimate story here somewhere, that's not a reason to build a giant case against Gerard based on things that are not so legitimate. SOG also includes some little breadcrumbs here and there about how Gerard
makes some pretty awesome gaming content.
And that he does deep respect Gerard. To me, his brief mentions of respect for Gerard are just icing on a shit cake. This is not how you present a story about someone you respect, even if you do not like their actions or choices. He mentions how the Open Hand family members have 0 hours recorded and $0 in paid out compensation, meaning...
But they also haven't done shit, apparently, according to the filings.
You know, watching his third video is interesting because I noticed on Jamie Lee's tax documents that she had $0 and 0 hours, and he never made any assertions about Jamie Lee Curtis not doing shit for her charity. Regardless, this is not the comment of a journalist. This is the comment of a drama channel. I'm sorry, he's not a drama channel, he's a journalist, obviously. I did initially wonder if them recording hours yet recording no compensation would be a violation of federal wage and hour law, hence why they decided to list 0 hours because they did not want to be compensated for their work. But as far as I understand FLSA, which is the law that makes sure that if you work hours, you get paid at least minimum wage, would not apply to a nonprofit so long as generally the organization doesn't make revenue from commercial activities and their only incoming source of money is from donations. But it could be possible that even if they didn't have to follow that law, they maybe felt that recording hours worked, but no money paid is not a great look. But I do understand that in those positions, that's just what volunteering is. But based on this controversy, I think you can see how quickly numbers on a page can be blown up into a wild-ass story very quickly. Also, tracking your hours for that volunteer work would be a bit of a challenge.
Do you include the late night conversations you've had with family members about what you're going to do with the money that's in honor of your mom? Do you really think that someone volunteering their time for a cause this close to their heart is all that concerned with accurately recording their volunteer hours if they're not legally required to do so? But again, any speculation we do has no evidence to back it up, so take it as you wish. And let's move on to... So now that we have a better idea of what SOG's video is about and what assertions and implications he makes, I want to talk about Gerard's life over the past few years. I think providing his timeline gives you as the viewer some key context that was very sorely missed in SOG's video. And again, while I am trying to primarily keep this about SOG's first video, I think I would be missing a very key point if I did not at least touch on the attempt to take Carl's video down. On November 15th, 2 days after their videos released, Carl tweeted about how his video was reported for a privacy complaint and YouTube rejected the complaint. Mudahar seems to believe that while this could have been a troll, this was likely done by someone associated with OpenHand, and that their attempt to take down the video is sketchy and odd. If it was someone at OpenHand, some context you might be missing is that Gerard's family has already faced harassment before because of Gerard's occupation.
I really wanted to get into, and I don't know, maybe just to humanize the situation,
Yeah.
and you don't have to, but how it felt to essentially be attacked,
Yeah.
and to have all these videos made, and to have the celebration of something failing that you worked so incredibly hard. You're such a sweet man. And you were trying to bring back this nostalgic thing that you and so many people loved. You were pouring your heart and soul.
Yeah.
Into making this thing as good as it can be. That was the position that you were given, you know, and to have it come to an end because of whatever production reason, and then to cop all the hate and be blamed for it ending, and to have all these people, even some people you thought were your friends, making videos about you and celebrating the end. How did that feel? And I know the answer, but I want to hear it.
It felt like I was a movie that was being played. People were just constantly rewinding it just to watch that moment. It just really felt like there were a subset of people out there that were just like, let's watch this again. There are people to this day that still harass me, that harass my employees, harass my family, harass my former G4 friends. It really hurt because I'm doing this for 12 years, right? I haven't really had any personal controversies that have, like aside from my former friend Greg when I first started The Completionist. The Completionist, I used to have like a sidekick character.
Oh yeah, I remember.
His name was Greg. We were best friends, and then we weren't, and it became this whole public thing.
Yeah.
This was before the era of drama channels and reaction channels. If it happened today, I wouldn't be standing here with you guys. I'd be gone. It's because
I doubt that.
I genuinely believe it. I was afraid of my audience for like 4 or 5 years because of what happened with Greg and I. And then when I finally revealed what happened and how I was trying to change it with New Game Plus, people respected me again, and the tide kind of changed.
And considering SOG gave exact instructions on how to find documents that contained their full names and one of their personal business addresses, and considering that the thousands of people who now know how to access that information also think you are a very bad person, yeah, I'd be a little worried too. When I received messages back from Mudahar, my partner told me he was really scared that Mudahar might end up dog whistling to a incredibly unstable audience. And I say they're unstable because, goddamn, they have infested the Completionist subreddit, and that unstable audience may take it upon themselves to dox and harass me or my family. And unfortunately, it is a legitimate fear. While there is the possibility that Mudahar would make an irresponsible decision like that, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that I really think the more likely scenario, instead of Mudahar having implied or said anything, is that his audience would have taken it upon themselves to do something like that, because people on the internet are fucking weirdos. And when you come after someone's favorite content creator, especially when you look like me and you're a fat woman, oh baby, you better believe you're gonna be on the gamer shit list. But when I started making videos, I understood very clearly that being vocal and visible online inherently comes with risk. Those are risks that, as a personal decision, I was okay with and I made sure my husband was okay with. But Gerard's family members did not ask for that risk. Gerard's family wanted to be a part of something that would make a difference in honor of their mother's legacy. And I can empathize with why someone at Open Hand would not want an audience of over 1 million people to know my first and last name, if it even was Open Hand who reported it in the first place. I just wanted to briefly mention this because folks on Twitter wanted to say that this submission of a privacy complaint was undeniable evidence of Open Hand's guilt. I think the Cleo family has been through enough shit in the past decade, and considering they were probably experiencing a huge influx of harassment because of these videos being released, I understand that they maybe just wanted some fucking peace. But, you know, maybe I'm being too humanizing here. We wouldn't want to do that, now would we, gamers? As discussed in the Nintendo interview from earlier this year, which again, I highly recommend you watch, Gerard talks about the variety of projects he's been involved in, and I want to go through some of the key ones that are relevant to our timeline. Gerard is the CEO of TOVG and is also the executive producer for The Completionist, which he's been doing since 2012. The Completionist is a weekly YouTube series where Gerard completes an entire game. That is, doing every single achievement and task, no matter how tedious and time-consuming, and talks about his experience doing it. The task alone of completing a game every week is incredibly time-consuming, and often Gerard has discussed how much completing a game has overtaken his work-life balance. In mid-2020, Gerard started auditioning for G4, a recently revived, then subsequently defunct TV channel dedicated to gaming-related content. He continued to do 9 auditions over the course of 10 months, and eventually in 2021, Gerard joined G4. He worked full-time for G4, and because he didn't stop his work at TOVG, he was likely working at least 80 hours a week between both places from 2021 to 2022, near the time frame where he said he was made aware that no money had moved. In October of 2022, G4 shut down due to a variety of internal issues. Gerard mentioned before how working for G4 was a dream for him, and also considering his level of investment with creating content on G4, I can only imagine how crushing it was for him to find out he lost his job through a tweet. As you also heard in the beginning of this section, Gerard, as well as his counterparts, friends, and family, also faced a variety of unwarranted backlash, taunting, and harassment when G4 shut down. In early 2021, Gerard opened up about a health concern he was having that caused low energy and, at points, was even life-threatening. Of course, this last one is obvious, but Gerard was also responsible for hosting Indieland every year, and I'm fairly confident saying he was highly involved with all facets of Indieland, which surely also kept him busy throughout the year and during the event. I also want to mention that in his video, SOG asks why is it that Gerard didn't cancel Indieland if he knew the money still hadn't moved. To me, the answer seems pretty straightforward. Imagine just stopping everything. There's many moving parts that are involved with running an event like Indieland, some of which are on screen. In the mind of someone as busy as Gerard, I think canceling an event like that is tantamount to giving up and quitting. It's just not mentally an option. But even better than me pontificating about the whys is if SOG just asked Gerard when he had the opportunity to do so. Instead, he chooses to ask his audience, which he knows will end up thinking to themselves, yeah, why didn't he cancel Indieland? That is suspicious. Gerard also does a wide variety of side projects, interviews, and even indie game publishing. Also, he has a long-term partner, and I can tell you from personal experience, especially when you're busy people, that maintaining an interpersonal relationship like that is a lot of fucking work in itself. So all of that is what we are able to know was going on in his life at the same time he was dealing with the issues with Open Hand. What I think could have been asked of Gerard at most was that he provided a yearly update on the state of the charity and where things were at logistically. But my take on that is that I think Gerard probably didn't think Indieland donors would care much about an update, because to him this was a long, drawn-out, bureaucratic family issue that was a matter of time to solve. And also, like I just laid out, Gerard is busy as fuck. I don't think even if he wanted to do an update video that he would have the time to do an update video. And sure, he could have tacked it on to his regular yearly update video or made a Reddit post, but again, I wonder if he just didn't feel there was much to update everyone on, or that people would even think the update was necessary. Maybe, considering that they said they were told by relevant parties that waiting until they reached $1 million was the best bet, they didn't think there were any problems to begin with. Gerard has an extremely transparent and open parasocial relationship with his audience. I mean, why do you think me and my partner literally call him best boy? Because at the end of the day, everyone trusts him that the money's gonna go to the right place at the right time. Or at least, that was probably Gerard's presumption about how his audience felt. I'm sure there are Indieland donors out there who feel genuinely betrayed that their money did not immediately go to a charity. If I had contributed to Indieland in years past, and fake fan, I know, I think my personal thought would be, oh, so you're telling me that donating from organization to organization is a logistical hellscape? Okay, yeah, that tracks. To me, this isn't a story unless it includes information about why that's the case. And that's probably why Gerard responded in the interview by saying that they were going to make a drama video about this. SOG's video could have been absolutely fascinating if he interviewed people at the Alzheimer's Association, or people who have worked at an NPO and dealt with charity-to-charity donations, or an actual charity tax accountant that was willing to go on record and explain why is it so hard to donate money without a bunch of it going towards operating expenses. But that probably wouldn't get as many clicks as an outright charity scandal, now would it? I mean, what's a more compelling story to our human nature than someone who seems like a good guy actually being a bad guy? At the end of the day, I understand that the additional context doesn't change the fact that the money hasn't moved. Now, it has taken me so long to write this script and film it and edit it that I do want to update you, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, that on December 4th, Open Hand did make the donation to AFTD. But I hope all of this gives you more context as to why Gerard, as one of 5 board members, probably was not capable of prioritizing a solution, particularly when they all felt that this just needed to be waited out until they reached $1 million. I know there will also be people out there who say, well, this just means that it's all his fault for stretching himself too thin. And to you I say, way to have some fucking empathy, bro. I bring this context up because I have seen a pervasive, never-ending narrative even after the donation has been made that Gerard is a negligent and malicious figure. Of course, as a fan of Gerard, there is a little piece of me that feels a parasocial responsibility to change this narrative because I don't think that this narrative is accurate. But I am doing my best to balance that feeling with a genuine search for the truth. For now, I ask you to consider that maybe, keeping in mind all of the different obligations and responsibilities Gerard had during this same timeline, you know, the devastating career-altering events, the life-threatening health scares, the bombardment of harassment and taunting and dogpiling because of G4, the extreme level of burnout someone must be feeling after 620 plus weeks of doing the exact same thing. Maybe this was as simple as him dropping the ball and fucking up like he said it was. Maybe raking this guy over the coals is not the fucking move. And finally, to add on to this clusterfuck of anxiety and pain and confusion and frustration, Gerard is likely to have had a friendly dialogue with Carl Jobst, a creator who he respected. On October 28th, Carl uploaded the tax documents to his shared Google Drive folder, indicating to me that they were investigating this whole story during Indieland. SOG said that they received an anonymous tip about this story, and that may very well be true. Personally, I don't believe in coincidences, and I sincerely wonder if there was an algorithmic advantage for them to report on this from October 27th to October 29th, when all the buzz and conversation was going on about Indieland. For me, and this is coming firmly out of my own ass here, I think that SOG, as a content creator who uploads nearly every day, was likely looking for his next story to report on and thought to himself, oh, Indieland's going on. You know, Everyone seems to really like that. I wonder if they would have any scandals, because that would be pretty salacious. You know, I bet if I follow the money, something interesting might turn up. And away they went. Again, I am firmly pulling this out of my own ass here, but I am far more likely to believe that scenario than I am that this is just an anonymous tip. If it was a tip, that means he has cultivated an audience so cynical that they probably had the same thought process as I just explained of, let's dig up some shit on them. Or maybe Carl and Mudahar just waited around on this tip until it was around time for Indieland, when it would be the best time to report on it. That's what this story's origins feel like to me. But again, I hope I'm completely wrong, and if so, I will firmly shove that theory right back up my ass. I just want to reassert here, in case it hasn't already been clear, that I am not in any way upset that Carl and Mudahar have revealed this truth about OpenHand, about how the money has not moved. I am, however, deeply upset that SOG chose to present this story without proper context to his audience of millions. At the end of the day, I understand there will be people out there who say, Maya, none of this context matters, okay? Gerard was on the board of a charity. He should have just known, okay? He should have just donated the money. And I ask of you, no, I beg of you, have some fucking humanity. I'm not gonna tell you to go touch grass. I'm gonna tell you to go smoke some grass and chill the
Our operations are transparent to regulatory bodies, including the IRS, and are subject to review to ensure adherence to these laws. Should there be any irregularities or misuse of funds, agencies such as the DOJ would intervene. Dude, the US government is not God, okay? Just because there's probably a lot of bad things going on transparently to the world. Remember, the IRS and the DOJ are human organizations. This probably isn't even enough money to show up on their radars. It'll show up on their radars now that people are reporting about this.
Now that I've got my anti-gamer gear on, I want to talk about this quote. The first thing I want to mention, a small quip, if you'll allow it, is why is he able to afford the IRS, a huge, highly responsible, highly important organization, the benefit of the doubt regarding human error, but not OpenHand, a roughly 5-person team made up of generally average people? But really, the main thing I want to talk about is how ominous this is to me. He knew that his video would blow the fuck up. He knew that people only needed to see the thumbnail and the title to have a decisively different opinion about who Gerard is. Some Ordinary Gamers releases a video nearly every damn day. For those of you that have made a video for YouTube before, you probably understand that the process of researching, writing, even if it's just bullet points, rehearsing, filming, and editing, and then waiting for it to upload on YouTube can take weeks, if not months. As I'm filming this, I'm approaching week 4. I'm not trying to say that SOG doesn't put work into his videos. I mean, to me, daily uploading sounds like a tedious, non-stop grind. However, I will say that the rate at which he churns out content is a recipe for low-quality content. Some of my favorite videos I've watched on YouTube are long-form video essays, and those can take months, even over a year to make a single video. But not every content creator needs to work at that specific pace in order to be legitimate and well thought out. Some people upload quarterly, sporadically, monthly, even weekly, all while being able to maintain a level of good faith commentary. But daily? I cannot imagine a worse way to make content that analyzes news stories and discourse as a presumably one-person team than a constant grind of shitting out clickbait. I mean, that's what this shit is, okay? Look at the titles. Look at the thumbnails. This is just clickbait shit. I'm not trying to gatekeep what it means to be a content creator, but I think it's fair to say that some content is more well thought out than others, and SOG's approach to making videos is being the dude sitting in front of his computer and microphone and ranting.
Before the organization tells us that they're doing the absolute best in responsible stewardship, I want them to explain all of this, because these are just a few discrepancies we found. I could only imagine what a professional auditor will find with this situation.
He says this as someone who has received multiple letters and had an interview with Gerard. He could have just asked him. In my opinion, any good journalist is going to have all of their facts lined up beforehand to ensure that they get the most out of the interview and are able to ask every question that they need to ask. And also, following up after the fact is an extremely valid thing to do if you might have missed a comment about something important. I don't really feel like I'm armchairing on this one because I have already interviewed multiple people, and every time, before I even ask for an interview, I have my questions prepared. I've even sent people my list of questions beforehand so they understand my intent of the interview. To me, that's just a show of good faith. Never have I, as a nobody, 70 subscriber amateur loser, gone into an interview without knowing every single question I want to ask. When I asked for interviews about Rockula, I made sure that I had already done thorough research so that way when I got to the interview, I wasn't asking them questions that could have been answered online. When I interviewed Nick or Lamont or Hot Freaks, I made sure that I asked questions that were respectful of their life experiences and their privacy, while also trying to hear their thoughts and perspectives in an authentic way. This is all just such a basic thing to me, and again, I'm a nobody. So when he says, I want them to explain themselves, I just think, my brother in Christ, you conducted the interview. This doesn't need to be a rhetorical question. You could have just fucking asked them. The reason it matters to me that SOG keeps saying he just wants them to explain all this is because Open Hand and Gerard already have. SOG saying that they need to explain themselves is just a way to wag his finger at them and get the audience to do the same. You need to give us your dissertation about why you made the choices you made, and we're going to ignore all the healthy amount of context and information you provided because your answer is not good enough for me. And all of this puts Gerard and Open Hand in an impossible situation. If they don't respond, people will continue to caterwaul and say that them not responding is evidence of them hiding something, even though they have already provided information and they have already stated they have no plans to publicly comment on this issue further. If they do respond, people will just roll their eyes and scoff and say that this is just them covering their ass and they're still hiding something. I truly believe that not a single soul who has complained about Open Hand not responding would actually earnestly evaluate any response they choose to provide. It is a lose-lose situation, and I think they are making the best choice for their family, safety, and mental health by staying silent. Now, I finished writing my script on December 1st. On December 4th, Open Hand donated $600,000 to AFTD. A few days later, on December 7th, SOG uploaded his 4th video, presumably discussing that they made the donation. I refuse to click on any more of his videos, but based on the thumbnail and title, it seems to me that everything I wrote about how no one is going to be satisfied even if they do donate the money or make a response was entirely true. When you go on to Reddit, all the conversations I've seen are about how this doesn't vindicate Open Hand and we shouldn't let this go. You know, real #neverforget type shit. Every person I've seen who has tried to give Gerard even the smallest shred of the benefit of the doubt has been downvoted to hell. The discourse about this remains unchanged. I didn't even find out that they had donated the money until I went to SOG's channel to fact check something and saw his video about it. Excluding the article that was basically a press release for this, I have seen no positive discourse or press coverage about them donating the $600,000. And Mudahar probably won't release another video about this because his work is done. He's probably at home right now patting himself on the back that $600,000, of which I bet he's never donated a single fucking penny, has been donated to charity finally, thanks to his and Carl's brave journalism. SOG got to release 4 videos about this during Q4. His audience continues to stay heavily invested in this topic, only further profiting him. And now he gets to move on, king of Shit Hill, continuing to release the same type of content. But you know who doesn't get to move on? Not just Gerard, not just the Khalil family, but the staff members at TOVG. TOVG has not been following their regular upload schedule and has barely uploaded anything since SOG's narrative has infiltrated the minds of millions. That means TOVG has barely been able to capitalize on Q4 at all. I'm sure there are many creators out there who rely on this time of high AdSense to keep their channel alive. And the fact that TOVG has essentially stopped posting either because of the harassment or because of the stress that it's put Gerard and his staff under, that means their business has missed out on a very large profit window for 2023. It also looks like, and there are people celebrating this on Reddit by the way, that the Completionist has lost roughly 12% of their patrons since SOG's video was uploaded. I have no idea what SOG's narrative means for the future of TOVG, but I very sincerely wonder if there haven't already been talks about cuts or drastic changes that they need to make in order to survive this PR nightmare. This is just another reason why SOG's irresponsible narrative has deeply angered me, because none of those employees deserve to have their livelihoods on the line. But none of that is Mudahar's problem, is it? Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's get back to my original script that is continually interrupted by this dude trying to capitalize on every upload opportunity. Jacques stated in the first letter, quote, "As we actively search for a partnership that meets our high standards, we welcome any recommendations you may have for potential benefactors. If you are aware of any organizations or research entities that might share our dedication and could benefit from our support, we are more than willing to consider them in good faith. Could you recommend any organizations or research entities that share our vision and could be potential collaborators in advancing our mission?" End quote. SOG says that this is a wild question to ask and states,
Dog, why should we, the journalists, do your job for you?
"But SOG, honey baby sweetie, I seem to recall you asking for free labor when you said..."
Again, I want everyone professional in the industry to look into this because this is again, when I said that this raises red flags to any CPA or accountant that I've shown, there's a reason for that.
My guy, your job as the content creator, especially one who dares call himself a journalist, is to do your due diligence. It is your job to make sure what you're saying is actually fucking true. That's the bare minimum. SOG is a large creator with over 3.5 million subscribers, okay? It's obvious he's doing well enough for himself that he makes a living making content for YouTube. He has the resources and he has the time to continue making follow-up videos about this topic. Why then, after his constant appeal to the experts, did he not, after 4 videos, take the time or the money to reach out to an expert who can add their constructive feedback? You would think by video 4, he would have taken the time to talk to a professional that he could cite, especially considering that he received my questions about why he did not cite a professional before video 2 was even released. But instead, in his 3rd video, he cries about how all the community can do is wonder.
So with each passing day, all the community can do is wonder, is the money even in the Open Hand Holdings account to begin with? Will it be donated to the charities that were name dropped on live streams and podcasts? And will it happen soon? These are the questions we ask.
As he splits his red-pilled sea of facts for his followers, guiding them to do said wondering. He has the power, time, and resources to get the citations that he needs to support his narrative. Yet he chooses to continue speculating like the armchair Sherlock he is. He then says,
"Your only job was to find who you should donate to."
Which just blatantly ignores their statement earlier that they have had trouble finding the right organization to donate to. As a reminder, they have said that they have donated body parts to the wrong organizations before. How can you not empathize at least a little bit with the amount of paranoia that would instill stealing a person, but no. Fuck empathy.
Or Indieland's website, have they written somewhere where they said, hey, listen, you can contribute to this incredible cause. Your proceeds go to charity. If you told me instead of going directly to the charity that it was going to your own bank account, sitting there collecting dust for years, then people probably wouldn't donate, okay? This is absolutely deceptive.
There is an on-screen note here that clarifies he meant to say the organization's account, not Gerard or someone else's personal account. However, I think this is a huge issue that he should have noticed at the time of filming or at the time of editing and taken the time to do a retake of that line. And intentional or not, you saying out loud your personal bank account plants a little seed in the viewer's mind that Gerard is stealing money. Actually, it doesn't just grow a seed, it grows a fucking bamboo shoot through the viewer's brain.
I guess what I'm asking you guys is, what do you want me to do as soon as possible? If it's like, hey Gerard, we want you to shut up and take the L so we can make content, that's fine. If that's what you guys think is the way to go, to call it a scam, sure. But I'm not trying to scam anyone. I would never try and scam in honor of my mom. Like, this is, I would not be outward facing knowing that I can get right through the coals for this.
SOG follows up this clip by saying it's not drama, and my script says LMAO. He also says that
this is erroring at best at severe negligence, or it could go into actual charitable fraud.
He also says that it's wild that the money is still just sitting in a bank account, and yes honey, so true, so valid, but then he says the money might as well have not existed. Like, if you're not gonna instantly give it away, then $650,000 that you've raised is meaningless. Like, yeah, okay bro, I guess $650,000 in funds raised for a very important cause is meaningless because of your sticking points. It just leaves me thinking about how journalists do not ignore the full context of a statement. Journalists do not pick and choose what they need to serve their predetermined narrative. Journalists report on actual news in good faith with fair framing. That's why we're going to move on to
Journalists.
My overwhelming impression after I watched his video for the first time is that SOG sincerely considers himself to be a journalist. And despite him only directly calling himself a journalist once in this first video, that's all he needs for his audience to believe it. But he's not a journalist. Ladies and gentlemen, we've made it to the clickbait section of the video, and I'm so excited to finally be here. Because, in my opinion, a journalist would have discussed all facets of this story, not just the little things they wanted in order to make a compelling story. I completely understand that he may not want to include every single little bit and piece in his video for the sake of time. However, there was a plethora of context in those letters that he simply chose not to talk about. And just because he mentions it existing does not mean he can get away with immediately dismissing it on grounds of dumbness. That is not journalism. And honestly, with my knowledge, his video seems to break some very fundamentals of the journalistic code of ethics. Yeah, that's right. I'll have you know that I took Intro to Journalism in high school, and I learned a thing or two about the fucking bare bone fundamentals about what it takes to be a journalist. Why do you think I didn't take a second class? I am a petty bitch. You have to work tirelessly as a journalist to be cognizant of your own bias, to understand the power you have when you report on a story, and to do your absolute best good faith effort to get all of the facts right the first time. Earlier this year, I actually did an extensive interview with a local journalist who I look up to a lot. I haven't released it because life is hard, and then I got sidetracked with this whole thing, and I'm so sorry. It was such a good conversation. I hope I'll get it out soon. But in our discussion, I learned quite a bit about what it takes for someone to do such a demanding job. I want to emphasize that I have a deep respect for real journalists, okay? They are the truth, good or bad. And we, as the listeners, need to do our due diligence to ensure that the journalists or journalists that we get our information from are actually legitimate. But I understand that's easier said than done at times. But that's why actual journalists follow a code of ethics to ensure that they're not taking advantage of people's trust. To me, when you say you're a journalist, that is giving yourself a huge amount of credibility. I do not take that shit lightly. That tells me that you likely have a degree in journalism and that you've spent countless long nights reporting on elections or sitting in town hall meetings, that maybe you've had people personally attack you for a story you reported on, and that you've probably had to sacrifice a lot of your personal life and time for the sake of a story being reported on accurately. I truly, deeply to my core, feel that Mudahar calling himself a journalist is an insult to journalists. To me, him claiming he's a journalist contributes to a dangerous precedent that many before him have followed of placing yourself adjacent to a professional that needs to be researched and unbiased when they are actually a very biased narrator that only provides evidence if it supports their thesis while completely ignoring the complications and nuance of the entire story. We need to end this idea that content creators are presenting us with the objective truth, because honestly, unless they are a journalist or a journalist publication, they are going to have bias.
And even then, the media we consume, at least in some small ways,
has bias. That's why, and no, this is not an advertisement even though it's the perfect segue, I use mediabiasfactcheck.com when I'm verifying a source or when I'm reading an article from a publication I don't know much about. This is something I think everyone can benefit from because it not only tells you the factual accuracy of their reporting, it also tells you where they lie on the American political scale. This is so crucial to be aware of and is something I wasn't even cognizant of until the clusterfuck of 2016. Besides knowing that Fox News has always been shit since I was a kid, I really didn't know much about media bias. The Society of Professional Journalists has a very widely known code of ethics. This isn't to say that every journalist has to specifically be a member of SPJ, but any journalist worth their salt is going to follow this code or a code that's very closely aligned to it. I recommend pausing to read the key ones that I think are most relevant. I've also linked the SPJ code in the description if you want to learn more about what it means to report quality journalism. Seek truth and report it. Ethical journalism should be accurate and fair. Journalists should be honest and courageous in gathering, reporting, and interpreting information. Minimize harm. Ethical journalism treats sources, subjects, colleagues, and members of the public as human beings deserving of respect. Act independently. The highest and primary obligation of ethical journalism is to serve the public. I've included Act Independently not because I think it's really relevant to this, but because I want you to have a general understanding. Be accountable and transparent. Ethical journalism means taking responsibility for one's work and explaining one's decisions to the public. But at the end of the day, there's really only so much I can assert as a Google Scholar. That's why I got... While I don't have connections to charity accountants, IRS agents, or lawyers, I do know a few journalists that were willing to take the time to provide their feedback. The first journalist I talked to preferred to stay anonymous, so I paraphrased their comments with their approval. They told me that they did not think SOG was a journalist, and that people tend to use that term pretty loosely. They also mentioned that reviewing the SPJ Code of Ethics and pointing out places where it may have been violated could be helpful context for viewers to understand why they feel him calling himself a journalist is a bit insulting. Keep in mind, this person being a professional journalist required them to obtain a degree, and they have spent years working for news outlets that take great care to ensure they are closely following the SPJ Code of Ethics. But don't think I was going to do this video without having a direct citation. I was able to talk to Matthew Kelly, a local news reporter. I asked if they thought this story was worth reporting and what they thought about the way SOG went about discussing this. They provided me with some really great insight that I think speaks for itself. Hey, I was finally able to watch the video and catch up on the situation. To answer one question directly, yes, I would certainly consider reporting a story about misrepresentation of charity funds, but it would have to be very thoroughly vetted first. I certainly understand the inclination to want to alert people who have donated in the past or might donate in the future that none of the money has actually been transferred to partner agencies since at least 2014. The journalistic error here from my perspective is in framing, setting it up as an accountability piece centered on Gerard when he's seemingly not the one directly in charge of dispersing funds and only became aware of the discrepancy last year in his own telling. I don't know a lot about charity donations, but you're supposed to be able to make restricted donations that specify you want it to go towards clinical trials or other specific non-administrative costs, and 9 years is an incredibly long time to not do that once while it's the stated goal of your organization. Maybe I'm sensitive as a journalist to accusations of stirring up shit for nothing or just trying to get views when you raise an issue like this, because that's always the easiest, laziest way to dismiss reporting. I wish they, SOG, would have pushed him, Gerard, to expound upon their methods for evaluating possible organizations they could donate to, but again, my suspicion is that he's not really the right person to talk to about that. It could have maybe been a more informative story if they delved into the challenges orgs like Open Hand have when looking for suitable partners to give money to, but they didn't go that route. It's a messy situation all around, to be sure. If it were me though, I would probably do quite a bit more digging and interviewing people who were actually involved in the decision-making process before going public with it. I want to thank both of these journalists for taking the time to give me their thoughts and feedback. I also personally want to make crystal clear that the inclusion of their commentary does not in any way mean they condone or support the content of my video. It means that they provided me with their perspective, and I sincerely ask that all of you be respectful of their privacy. They're both very busy people, and they still took the time to provide us with their insight. So allow me to make this another small little plug to support your local journalism outlets if you have the means, because we need more people like this to be employed. Now, Matthew mentioned something about restricted donations, so let's talk about those. From what I found, SOG made no mention of restricted donations, and after learning about them, I think they're really important to bring up. Charity Navigator, a reputable source for information regarding charity-related questions and ratings, discusses a few important things about restricted donations. My takeaway from this Google Crash course is that restricted donations are complicated and require a lot of discussion between the donor and the beneficiary. I reached out to Open Hand to see if they had specifically discussed any restricted donations, but at the time of releasing this video, have received no comment. But again, Open Hand said they don't plan to comment on this any further, so that's not really that strange. However, based on the press release that I saw about the donation they made to AFTD, it does seem like a restricted donation might have been what they did. Now that we've looked at the overall story, missing context, and what it means to really be a journalist, I want to look at SOG's possible bias, motivations, and make an appeal to you as the audience.
I want to preface by saying that this section is completely speculative, okay? These are all my own thoughts, projections, and musings, so keep that in mind while listening. What really aggravated me about doing this whole video is that at a certain point I just feel like I'm repeating myself, because that's what SOG does in his video for 38 minutes when it could have been like a 15-minute video. For those not aware, the current algorithmic reward is watch time. So that means the longer your audience watches your videos, the higher your AdSense payouts. And the more often you're going to be recommended to other people. And wouldn't you know it, YouTube directly cites just before the holidays as the time when advertisers may bid higher. Obviously, that May is doing a lot of heavy lifting for me, but from what I've seen through about 10 years of watching YouTube is that a lot of creators say that Q4 is the time they're going to make the most money. That means that this is a great time for a monetized channel to release their best video of the year. And anytime you tear down a creator, usually the trust their audience had in them transfers over to you. So in addition to the monetary gain of views and channel growth, there is a lot of social clout and goodwill to be had. The level of press coverage and discourse that continues to go on, at least during the time of writing this, continues to benefit SOG. It means more people will probably follow him on Twitter to stay up to date. It means that more people will be sure to watch his follow-up videos so they can get an update. And boy oh boy, I did not realize how right I would be, considering that it wasn't until his 4th video that the view count started to falter at below 500,000 views. But that also indicates to me that he has successfully curated an audience that does not care if the money actually ends up being donated. They care about being angry gamers. And can I say, as someone who has once had a niche little community online watch one of my videos all the way through and tell me that they enjoyed it, that shit feels good. Getting messages from friends who watched something I made is extremely validating. And I can only imagine what that validation feels like on the scale that SOG operates at. But I do think it's fair to say that most of us on the internet, at least the ones of us that are watching this and caring about this, more than we would like to admit, are all chasing the high of validation. Now, this being the final part I'm filming, knowing what we all know now, I do have to say it's pretty vindicating to know that SOG's validation is quickly crumbling before his eyes, as now he needs to utilize his Google searching skills to find a good lawyer. But the last thing I want to touch on in regards to his video is the thing that has disgusted me the most. Toward the end of his video, SOG includes a nearly full-minute clip of the CEO of FlyQuest, a sponsor of Indieland for 2023, saying that the cause is close to his heart and they'll be donating $15,000. Can I just say, as someone who edits my own videos, that this clip definitely could have been cut down, and when I watch it I just think, wow, you are really getting the most of that runtime, aren't you, buddy? Then SOG dramatically zooms in on this man's face and says,
"Do you think he knew that the money that he gave from his organization just sat in an account when he popped the confetti?" That's a question I want to see. What do you think the CEO of FlyQuest is going to think when he sees this whole situation unfold before his eyes? That's the most messed up thing in this entire situation, too.
This gives me what words can only really quantify as the big icky. No journalist would say this. A person with a gamer mob behind them would say this. To me, this is a dog whistle to his audience that he knows is chronically online. All of the discourse that I have seen in YouTube comments and on Reddit and on Twitter is pure, non-challenging agreement with everything SOG said. And some people even take it further and do their own little tiny investigations, like calculating how much they missed out through not investing the money and making money on interest in a bank account. Like, there's so many other ways you could have spent your time. Like, you know, making a whole video essay about it, like this loser. But his dog whistle, to me, anyway, is, what do you think he would think about this story? You guys should go tweet at the CEO of FlyQuest and share this video with him. I mean, it's only right that he knows the truth. And the truth is that Gerard scammed him, and guys, that is so messed up. This is when SOG's video becomes a whole new level of underhanded fuckery. Him saying this and winking at his audience is a way to dissuade not only FlyQuest, but future sponsors of Indieland and future sponsors and partners that may want to work with Gerard himself. This is insidious. And just, it's icky, it's gross, it's icky. Like, what the fuck? This was the moment where I said, no matter what happens, no matter the outcome, I'm gonna finish this video, because this is unacceptable behavior. For some ordinary gamers to portray himself as just a good guy journalist looking out for the donors is not who he is as a creator. SOG is primarily a drama YouTuber who sometimes stumbles upon nuggets of truth and spins them into his own story that ensures that the person he's talking about is a total villain. I do not think it's unfair of me to say that this video has led people to think that Gerard is a thief, because MSN initially reported on this by saying that Gerard was accused of, quote, stealing donations. This headline was screenshotted on November 16th. The headline has changed a few times since then, but if even a reporting outlet with high factual reporting initially gets the wrong idea, I think that's a pretty good indicator that the layperson watching this video will do a very similar leap of logic. That's because Some Ordinary Gamer's video was never an op-ed report. It might feel like it, but Some Ordinary Gamers is no different than the InfoWars pundit who spews misinformation for profit, ignoring all inconvenient truth in service of a narrative that provides the highest emotional reaction from a carefully curated audience. They draw people in through half-truths and small curiosities that can be twisted into much scarier stories through the lens of just asking questions and, well, if it was me and if it was my money, I would be. They draw you in to get the biggest emotional reaction so they can capitalize on your shock and monetize your outrage. This is not to say that Some Ordinary Gamers or Mudahar is in any way politically adjacent to the figureheads that I have referenced. This is to say that anybody on any side of the political spectrum is very capable of using these cheap and dirty tactics. But I also want this to be a reminder not to feed into the fear-mongering that SOG does here. Fear-mongering that conveniently alleviates himself of ever needing to donate to a charity. He utilizes an age-old tactic of Rush Limbaugh-adjacent hasty generalizations where he says,
"This is a situation where it makes me question every charity."
I think there are people who passively watch this video and subconsciously or consciously thought, wow, I mean, if we can't even trust charities anymore, who can we trust? I mean, I'm so glad I found this guy. It seems like he's the only one willing to report the truth. These are the unspoken subtleties that I think a lot of people don't notice when they're watching. At least, that's how I perceive statements that Some Ordinary Gamers has made. In reality, if you are interested in making a charitable donation to an organization and you have questions, you can do what I did and send an email to that organization and ask your questions, or look them up on Charity Navigator. The parasocial Gerard I've seen for the past 6 years is a man who wears his heart on his sleeve. He always tries to stand up for what's right. He struggles with sometimes taking on too much. He's someone who recently and probably still has an ongoing battle with a potentially life-threatening health condition. He has 5 therapists. This is a man who, on a very large list of to-dos, did not accomplish the thing we thought he should in the way we thought he should have done it. Now, can all these things about someone having their own issues in life and their own problems and complications be true, and they're still capable of being a bad person? Absolutely. 100%. I, of all people, do not want to contribute to this concept that if we only see someone being a good person, well then, gee, there's no way they could be a bad person. But I do want to remind you that up until the point of SOG's video releasing, Gerard has generally been considered to be a figure who is transparent, and a lot of people look up to him for the fact that he is successful while maintaining his integrity and doing his best to be a decent human being. I believe that Gerard trusted Carl going into the interview. I believe he trusted they wouldn't take something he did or didn't do as 1/5 of the responsible party and use it against him. But they did. Gerard probably trusted that Some Ordinary Gamers wouldn't use this story as a way to deter potential Indieland sponsors. But he did. Going into the interview in good faith, he probably still had a feeling that it would end up this way, but hoped that his transparency and honesty would be respected and used in good faith. But it wasn't. During the interview, Gerard realizes what the story is going to become, hence why he gets so angry. Something he rarely does. When you know what led Gerard to this interview, the struggles he and his family faced, and the hectic rat race of keeping afloat in one of the most volatile parts of the entertainment industry while supporting himself, his loved ones, and his employees in one of the most expensive cities in the country, it's suddenly a lot harder to think that someone with that much on their plate would intentionally hold your money as some ordinary gamers' claims. However, when you're presented with the, hey, I like this guy as much as everyone else, but I was just shocked, ladies and gentlemen, to uncover all of these red flags, you're all at once drawn into a narrator that you view as your peer that you can trust because they're sensible, they're just like you. It is a smokescreen to aggravate and radicalize your opinion so that Some Ordinary Gamers is always the sole purveyor and protector of truth and good. You are repeatedly bombarded with the same point over and over again, so you don't have the time to question why he's able to assert this so strongly, whether the citations he makes are actually legitimate, or who the human being they're talking about even is. All you're left with is a reporter who uncovered some red flags that is simultaneously also just some guy on the internet asking endless fucking rhetorical questions. The average viewer is going to watch his video in far more good faith than SOG ever did to Gerard. If you have a reputation worth destroying, you can bet Some Ordinary Gamers will be there to tear you down with all of the manipulative rambling and journalistic integrity of Tucker Carlson. I'm not here to fault anyone who trusted Some Ordinary Gamers who made it harm. I'm here to appeal to the viewers out there who want to take this as an opportunity to become better critical thinkers and assess the media we consume through a more balanced lens. Up until I started working on this video, I've been off Twitter since August and I have been a much happier person for it. But I popped back on to kind of see the general discourse people were having about it. Overwhelmingly, it is open hand, bad. Gerard, bad. SOG, red pill rizzed up and goated with the sauce. Up until the point where Gerard released his side of the story, I have seen very little discourse defending Gerard either in part or full-throated. And it felt very emblematic of the problem we have of looking for our villain of the week. It's also taken me back to my own experiences of being dogpiled on Twitter. A few years ago, and I promise this is relevant, I went public with accusations I had against the person who had sexually assaulted me. I spent hours writing every single tedious detail of the encounter to ensure that when I made a very serious accusation, I had shown in good faith that I was willing to provide every detail someone may want to know that could help give credence to my story. Thankfully for me, about 60% of the discourse and messages I got were positive and loving and supportive. But that 40% of people gave me the second most traumatizing kind of experience in my life, second to having been raped. Because despite everything I did to have full transparency, even answering some people's questions, which I did not have to do, people were not satisfied. Some people were never going to be satisfied. Because like I had mentioned earlier, they believed this was a good person, and good people can't do bad things. But that's why it's important to take every story we hear on a case-by-case basis. And while the source of my scenario varies very much from the source of Gerard's, I can very deeply empathize with how fucking shitty it feels to do everything in your power to be honest, and to still be met with bad faith actors. I actually recently messaged somebody who I knew and before the situation happened, kind of looked up to, that I remembered had contributed to the dogpiling. I started by saying that I didn't expect a response from them, but I couldn't move on if I didn't tell them how I was feeling. I told them how harmful and unnecessary it was for them to tweet out their thoughts and opinions about some of the most vulnerable moments of my life, and to openly pontificate on whether or not I'm really telling the truth. But then something really cool happened, and that person had the integrity to respond to me and to apologize. And they also told me that they probably really shouldn't have been just tweeting their thoughts about a situation that serious. And they also had no idea that something they posted on the internet like that could deeply affect me 4 years later. My vested interest in making this video is not because I'm here to simp for Gerard. I would love nothing more than for this video to maybe help some people understand that maybe we don't need to shit out all of our thoughts online all the time, especially if we don't have all of the facts we need to make the clear assertion. But that's the problem. Humans love to oversimplify because it's just easier for our brain to process information when we condense things down into easily recognizable patterns or situations. But when we hold people up on a high pedestal of moral greatness, the only possibility for that person is for us to tear them down from where we built them. We are so quick to turn our backs on creators and believe that they are undeniably and ostensibly evil based on so little actual damning evidence that tells us that. I have seen many comments of people saying, I really used to look up to Gerard, but I just can't trust him anymore after this video. People are willing to throw away years of parasocial context if they watch just one video essay or see one tweet that is convincing enough to make them change their minds. Please do not get me wrong. When creators are genuinely bad people, when they're abusive, when they're bigoted, when they're intentionally scamming people, they deserve to be held accountable and should not be surprised that people want answers. As I hope you've gathered, I'm not afraid to call out shitty people for their shitty behavior, even if it's at the total annihilation of my mental health and personal safety. Holding malicious figures accountable for their actions is a good thing, but every single story we encounter online, even if it has similarities to other stories we've heard before, even though history often repeats itself, we owe it to ourselves to think critically about each piece of evidence that's being presented to us. Why it's being presented to us in this way. Why by this person? Why at this time? And how much that impacts the person being discussed as much as it impacts the person discussing it. The reason I'm passionate about critical thinking and why I am not here to point the finger is because I have always struggled with having kind of a butterfly mind where the last convincing argument I hear subconsciously becomes my own. Critical thinking is something I work very hard on every day because it is so much simpler to just believe what someone's telling you. Because it's easier to take people at their word than challenge what you're being told. And because you want to trust people. And again, while I don't think anyone really gives a shit what my biases are, if you want to read them, they're in the description.
And I did not want to be in the segment that was being hosted, the one we were going to do,
Right.
because I'm like not a negative guy in that way. Like if you have to really do something with the eShop to piss me off, right? That's like that's where my insanity goes.
Right.
But for the most part, I'm that guy that's like game good, graphic good. And so I tried to post some ideas of like maybe we should like try and lay off the negativity and kind of embrace the good things about games and why we love them, because that's always been my aesthetic and pride and joy.
Negativity sells though.
That's true, but there was no one in the room that was like, we have to get those negative views, kid. Like no one had that perspective. Okay. It was just like we were pitching every day was like, let's pitch this idea. Let's do this. We were just seeing what stuck to the wall because we just wanted to see what was fun and what people enjoyed.
Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Gerard's interview has always been presented in a very particular way. I really feel SOG had minimal due diligence beside making sure they got an interview with him. And even then, I feel like the intent of that interview was to make him sound bad while simultaneously being able to say, we did our due diligence. There's multiple times where they include a clip of Gerard's interview, and I think to myself, they included this so Gerard came off like he was defensive and hiding something and like he's being a dick. But it just makes me like Gerard more. I have no idea what the framing of that interview was, how they asked their questions, if they said anything that could have been inflammatory.
I'm not trying to say, please don't make videos on me, because that's just what's going to happen. I can't stop you guys from doing your thing. What I do want to do is do the right thing possible, because the last thing I want to do is ruin the legacy of my family, of my mom and her memory, especially because this is such a personal thing for the last 25 years of my life. I'm not trying to be like, do you guys want money to help me hide this? It's not what this is at all. I'm just asking from a humanity perspective of, like, if I am the target of this, I have 20 mouths to feed. I have sponsors. I have a business. I'm trying to make video games. I'm trying to get out of content creation so I don't have to worry about YouTube anymore and do better things in the world. And I just know, because of my track record of things like G4 exploding, me being friends with JonTron when he was a racist, you know, I've been a part of, like, you know, Pro Jared, like, pulling one thread about the charity thing is going to upheave my entire life in a way that scares the living crap out of me. And I don't want to go home tonight and tell everyone, hey, there is a gigantic thing coming to claim my career, and you all have to close down and find somewhere else to do. I know this is shitty me to say this. I'm not trying to ask for sympathy or anything, but this kind of stuff, I mean, I've been following your guys' stuff for years. The stuff with Billy Mitchell, Carl, the stuff that you've done, Muto, with tons of content creators over the years. Like, there's no nuance to this. People are going to see this, and they're going to immediately go, that Gerard guy who's been nice to a bunch of people actually isn't very nice overall. Fuck him. Let's get rid of him. And that's the thing that I'm terrified the most, because I don't have the power or opportunity for that. That's not in my control. I've got nothing in my pockets to do that. I have nothing. And so that's just where my head's at. I just want to be able to create content and do good in the world. And this is just going to, it's, even if I survive this somehow, even if this is like, people are like, well, whatever, that's how it is. Yeah. It's going to take the passion out of what I do. People aren't going to trust me ever again. I'm not going to trust myself ever again. And I'm just going to walk away from all this. Like, this is like me being like, great, so I'm out. Not just of content creation or being an online personality. I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to disappear and start over and never talk to anyone ever again. And that's the spiraling that I've been dealing with the last 3 days of talking to therapists and doctors. And
but when I hear Gerard's interview snippets, I think, holy shit, they pissed off Mr. Sunshine. The clip at the beginning of the section is from the podcast Nintendo that released March 30th, 2023. It was honestly really strange and sad to watch it as part of making this video. You gather the image of a man who, time and time again, has been forged in the fire. A man who's just doing his best, but still, life just loves throwing shit his way. My video has given you a variety of emotional appeals, and especially the context that I have of Gerard, which is the sweet, sleepy boy. And my purpose for doing that is to humanize him, because throughout SOG's video, it seems like he's being presented as someone who's negligent, possibly corrupt, and just overall evil. Because who wouldn't think that stealing from a charity is evil? If you don't know anything about the guy, then you have no reason to see him as otherwise. I know I was really quick to defend Gerard in my mind when I first heard SOG's video. I know I still find myself feeling defensive of Gerard, and a lot of that is just simply the nature of a parasocial relationship. So I try to remind myself that at the end of the day, I don't know shit about who Gerard is as a person. And I also don't know shit about who Mudahar is as a person. At the end of the day, I am just one more person in a world of billions who thinks that my perspectives are important enough to add to the discourse. Those are my on-paper qualifications to talk about this subject. The first week of writing, I found myself watching the intro to Gerard's Cave Story video, and I cried. Because I realized that 2023 was the 10-year anniversary of his mom's passing. I'm gonna interject my own feelings in a very emotionally charged way like I can. Because I need to say that I really feel for the Khalil family in this moment. Because this indie land is not going to be primarily marked by how Gerard and his family were able to take something incredibly devastating and find a way to turn it into a decade of something beautiful. The experiences will still be there, but the primary memory they're probably going to have from this year is some dude's success in profiting off of Gerard's demise. I don't think this will end Gerard. Through watching his videos, I've seen and learned about many times in his life where he's been consistently faced with uncertainty, turmoil, and close calls in his career that get so deep they affect his personal life. I have no doubt that Gerard will eventually be able to get out of this situation with his head held high. I respect the fuck out of Gerard for even entertaining an interview with SOG and Carl. I think he knew going into the interview that it was gonna end up all like this, with strangers on the internet doing deep dives into my life and my family's lives and just generally spending too much time talking about it. But he did the interview anyway, because he has always been nothing if not transparent whenever possible. The cost of integrity is being willing to lose everything with your hands above the table. So why am I here, daring to bring my opinion into this as a nobody, effectively? Because nothing else forces me to do this besides an inherent need and desire to create and speak out about things like this. When I dedicate tens of hours to videos about rock and roll vampires or a silly short film or a shitpost, it's because I want to do it. I am internally compelled to create these atrocities. I have a full-time job in addition to making videos. I'm a musician, I'm a mother, I got other shit going on in my life, but I still make time for this. Because the thing that drives me is so far removed from any fucking potential to profit. Instead, I'm motivated because there's a story to tell. A story that matters to me. A story that compels me. A story that, in some way or another, is misunderstood. That's why I started a nuanced discussion 2 years ago. I was so sick of feeling like online discourse has to be this world of good versus evil. That's not how we have real-world conversations. And the one-side dialogue of tweets and posts and videos like Nuanced leaves us all with only the truth that the person sharing it will allow us to see. This right here, this parasocial thing that we have going on, this is not possible on any other part of the internet. Only can a one-on-one conversation come close to what this format is able to achieve. And I find it deeply gratifying to share what I want to create on YouTube. Because this, you see my humanity more than any other place on the internet. You give me more grace than text on a screen. You can see that I'm a person. You can see the different aspects that make me me. But you also don't really know who I am as a person. That's not possible for anyone but the people who are closest to me in life. And that's true of everyone, online or offline. I don't claim to be the objective truth. I have many biases on this subject. I have personally looked up to Gerard for many years. I don't think there's anything that he's capable of doing that's going to change that. He's one of the many creators that inspires me to be authentic to my creative voice, to stand by my truth, but have the humility to apologize when I need to, but not for the things that don't deserve one. My bias can color this entire video for you in hindsight, and that is perfectly fine. I want you to sit with that, to give it time, and then eventually decide if I did or did not make legitimate points. Obviously, I have my opinions on the kind of content that SOG creates. And while I feel that the content a person creates can be very indicative of the kind of person they are, I have done my best to try not to make those assumptions in my mind when talking about Nuanced. That's why I've primarily referred to him as SOG in this video instead of Nuanced, to kind of try and keep those things separate. Some people tell me he doesn't deserve that grace, but I gotta practice what I preach. Nuanced, I know you're watching this, or at least have watched part of this. I really hope you've made it this far, because I can understand how it's not easy to see someone deeply dissect something that you have made. My only ask of you, after dedicating a lot of time to this, is that you genuinely consider your intentions with the content you create. I think you genuinely do feel that you're in search of the truth. That is a good thing. However, I don't feel that you have gone about that search for truth in a way that is primarily productive or kind or even really in the long term completes that search. I don't know that this effort will change the way that you choose to make content, but again, be sick as fuck if it did. I'm grateful for you at least replying to me and being respectful. Granted, I think that's the bare minimum, but I'll thank you for that at least. I trust that you will respect my privacy and ensure that your much larger audience does not try to fuck up my life. As a nobody creator, doing a video like this is kind of scary. Nobody could see it, and I could still have people harassing me for it. If you've made it this far and it has not come across that we really need to start working on the way that we interact with each other and consume content online, I've fucking failed. I made this video not because I want some ordinary gamers to become your new villain of the week, but because I want all of us, myself included, to continue thinking critically about the media that we consume, to question the motives of the people who own, share, and create it, but to also keep that skepticism healthy, and that it's okay to believe people if, again, majority of the evidence points in that direction. And please remember that content creators, media outlets, and even yourself are not pure objective beings. We are all human. I did my best to make this video in good faith. Mudahar said he made his video in good faith. You decide what these things mean to you.